Hi there, friends. Thanks for tuning in to Fiction Moon. Get ready for an incredible journey as we present what if Harry used his Potterblack wealth to buy every wandmaker in Europe and left his enemies powerless. If you find our stories entertaining, a simple like and subscribe would mean everything to us. Your support motivates us to create more. Here we go. Chapter 1, The Acquisition. The goblin's long, gnarled finger traced across the ledger with deliberate slowness. Harry fought the urge to shift in his seat as the creature's eyes narrowed at the figures before him. As you can see, Mr. Potter, the combined assets of the Potter and Black estates are substantial. Nagnock glanced up, his expression unreadable. Few wizards command such resources. Harry leaned forward, adjusting his glasses as he studied the parchment. The numbers seemed to swim before his eyes, arranged in neat columns that stretched across multiple pages. Properties in wizarding communities across Britain. Investment portfolios dating back centuries. And gold, more gold than Harry had ever imagined possessing. This can't be right, Harry murmured, flipping through the pages. The Potter vault I visited in first year was, your trust vault, Nagnock interrupted, a hint of impatience in his voice. A mere allowance. The main Potter family vault was sealed until you reached maturity. As for the Black fortune. The goblin's lips curled into what might have been a smile. Let us say that the most ancient and noble house of Black believed in accumulating wealth almost as much as they believed in blood purity. Harry ran a hand through his perpetually untidy hair, still struggling to process the information. 3 years had passed since the Battle of Hogwarts, yet he'd avoided dealing with his inheritance, focusing instead on helping rebuild the wizarding world. Now, at 21, he could no longer ignore the responsibility that came with his names, rather. And no one else can access these assets. You are the sole heir to both lines, Mr. Potter. The wealth is entirely at your disposal. Nagnock closed the ledger with a snap that seemed to echo in the marble chamber. What you do with it is, of course, your affair. Harry nodded absently, his mind already racing with possibilities. Not for himself, he'd never cared much for luxury. But for what the gold could accomplish in a world still healing from war. Thank you for your time, Nagnock. I'd like copies of these records, please. The goblin inclined his head in a gesture that wasn't quite respectful. As you wish. 20 minutes later, Harry emerged from Gringotts into the bright sunshine of Diagon Alley, his expanded moleskin pouch now containing detailed records of a fortune that placed him among the wealthiest wizards in Britain. The knowledge felt strange, almost uncomfortable, another unwanted distinction for the boy who lived. The alley had mostly recovered from the war. Shopfronts gleamed with fresh paint, and crowds bustled between businesses with an ease that had been unimaginable during Voldemort's reign. On the surface, the wizarding world was healing. But Harry knew better. He paused outside Flourish and Blots, watching as a familiar figure emerged from the bookshop. Lucius Malfoy had lost weight since his brief imprisonment in Azkaban, and his once immaculate appearance showed signs of neglect. Yet the former Death Eater still carried himself with the same aristocratic bearing, his silver-tipped cane tapping against the cobblestones as he made his way down the street. Malfoy had avoided a lengthy sentence by providing information on his former associates, a fact that still rankled Harry. Too many of Voldemort's followers had slipped through the cracks in a justice system still riddled with corruption and incompetence. As if sensing Harry's gaze, Malfoy glanced up. For a moment, their eyes locked. Then Malfoy's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile before he turned away, disappearing into the crowd. That smile decided it. Harry had been considering various ways to use his newfound wealth, from expanding SPW to funding St. Mungo's research division. But in that moment, watching Malfoy walk free while so many good people lay dead, something crystallized in Harry's mind. A plan both audacious and simple. He needed to talk to Hermione. You want to do what? Hermione's voice rose an octave as she set down her teacup with enough force to slosh liquid onto the table. Harry glanced around the leaky cauldron's back room, grateful for the privacy charm he'd cast before beginning this conversation. Hannah Abbott, who now managed the pub, had been happy to provide them with a quiet space away from curious eyes and ears. By Ollivanders' shop. And then every other wandmaker I can find. Harry kept his voice steady, watching as Ron's eyebrows climbed steadily toward his hairline. Mate, I think you've gone mental, Ron said, shaking his head. What in Merlin's name would you want with a bunch of wand shops? Harry leaned forward, his green eyes intense. Think about it. What's the one thing every wizard needs? The tool that channels magic itself. A wand, Hermione answered automatically, her brow furrowed in concentration. But Harry, controlling the wand market wouldn't, she broke off, her eyes widening as understanding dawned. Oh. Exactly. Harry nodded. If I control who gets wands, I control who can perform magic effectively. At least in Britain. Ron whistled softly. That's, actually brilliant. In a slightly terrifying way. It's not about power for its own sake, Harry said quickly, recognizing the concern in Hermione's expression. It's about ensuring that people like Lucius Malfoy and the other Death Eaters who slipped through the cracks can't just rebuild their power base and start again. The Ministry failed to properly clean house. So we do it ourselves. Hermione bit her lip, her analytical mind clearly working through the implications. It's unprecedented. And legally complicated. The Ministry regulates wand makers, but they don't control them. There's no actual law against creating a monopoly in the magical world. Because no one's ever had enough gold to try, Ron added, reaching for another biscuit. Until now, apparently. Harry nodded, spreading his hands. I saw Malfoy today. Walking free, looking smug. How many others are out there, just waiting for the next dark wizard to follow? We defeated Voldemort, but we didn't change the system that allowed him to gain power in the first place. Hermione's expression softened. I understand why you want to do this, Harry. I do. But controlling access to wands, it's an enormous responsibility. Where do you draw the line? Who decides who deserves magic and who doesn't? We do, Harry said simply. People we trust. No more corrupt officials deciding who walks free because of political connections or family names. Just a simple rule, if you supported Voldemort, if you believe in blood supremacy, you don't get a wand. Ron leaned back in his chair, studying Harry with newfound respect. You've really thought this through, haven't you? This isn't just some impulse. I've had 3 years to watch the Ministry fumble the aftermath of the war, Harry replied, an edge of bitterness in his voice. 3 years of watching Death Eaters walk free on technicalities while good people are still burying their dead. Silence fell as his friends considered his words. Harry didn't press them. This wasn't a decision to make lightly, and if anyone could spot the flaws in his plan, it would be Hermione. Finally, she sighed. I won't pretend I don't have concerns. But I understand why you want to do this. Her brown eyes met his, warm with the same fierce loyalty that had carried them through years of friendship. What's your first move? Harry's tension eased. He hadn't realized how much he'd needed their support until he had it. Ollivander. He's been struggling since the war. I think he might be receptive to an offer that lets him focus on wand craft without worrying about running a business. Ron nodded slowly. Dad says the old man hasn't been the same since his captivity at Malfoy Manor. Nightmares, trouble concentrating. Shame, really. It's not charity, Harry clarified. I genuinely value his expertise. I just want to put it to better use than selling wands to the children of Death Eaters. Hermione drummed her fingers on the table, her mind clearly racing ahead. You'll need legal representation. And a business structure. And a way to approach other wandmakers that doesn't look threatening. Harry smiled, a genuine warmth spreading through him. That's why I need you, Hermione. I can provide the gold and the vision, but I provide the brains, she finished with a small smile. Some things never change. And me? Ron asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Security, Harry replied without hesitation. Once word gets out about what we're doing, there will be resistance. I need someone I trust watching my back. Ron straightened, his chest puffing out slightly. Since joining the Auror program, he'd developed a confidence in his abilities that had been lacking in their youth. Count me in. Though George will kill me if I quit the joke shop without notice. You won't need to quit yet, Harry assured him. This starts small. Just the three of us planning, then approaching Ollivander. If it works. If it works, Hermione said quietly, you'll change the balance of power in Wizarding Britain forever. Harry met her gaze steadily. That's the idea. Ollivander's shop looked much as it had when Harry first visited at 11, narrow, shabby, with dusty windows and peeling gold letters. The interior remained dim and crowded with thousands of narrow boxes stacked to the ceiling. The only difference was the old wandmaker himself, who appeared even more frail and ethereal than Harry remembered. Mr. Potter. Ollivander's silvery eyes fixed on Harry with unsettling intensity. Holly and Phoenix Feather, 11 inches. Still serving you well, I trust. Harry unconsciously touched the wand at his hip. Very well, sir. Though that's not why I'm here today. No. A faint smile touched the old man's lips. I suspected as much. Few wizards visit wandmakers between purchases, and you are not in need of a replacement. He gestured to the dusty chairs in the corner of the shop. Please, sit. My old bones appreciate the rest these days. Harry took a seat, noting how Ollivander's hands trembled slightly as he lowered himself into the opposite chair. The wandmaker had never fully recovered from his imprisonment. Mr. Ollivander, I'll be direct. I'd like to purchase your business. If the wandmaker was surprised, he didn't show it. Those moon-like eyes simply studied Harry with the same unnerving focus. May I ask why, Mr. Potter? Harry had prepared for this question, rehearsing his answer with Hermione. The truth, but carefully framed. I believe wand-making is one of our most important magical traditions. But I also believe it needs to be practiced with greater care regarding who receives such powerful tools. Harry leaned forward. You yourself once told me that Voldemort's wand did terrible things. I want to ensure that those who would follow in his footsteps never have that opportunity. Ollivander steepled his fingers, considering Harry's words. You wish to control who may purchase wands. I wish to ensure that wands go to worthy witches and wizards, Harry corrected gently. While allowing master craftsmen like yourself to focus on the art without financial concerns. A long silence followed. Outside, the sounds of Diagon Alley filtered through the dusty windows, laughter, conversation, the everyday noise of a world that had nearly been lost. My family has made wands for over 2,000 years, Mr. Potter, Ollivander said finally. Each generation passing knowledge to the next. I have no children to continue that tradition. Harry sensed an opening. What if you could continue the tradition without the burden of running a shop? What if you could take apprentices, document your knowledge, focus solely on the craft itself? Something flickered in the old man's eyes, interest, perhaps even hope. You would allow me to continue making wands? I would insist on it, Harry replied earnestly. Your knowledge is irreplaceable. I'm not interested in ending wand-making traditions, just ensuring they serve the right purposes. Ollivander studied him for another long moment before asking, and what would you offer for a business that has been in my family since before Hogwarts was founded? Here came the delicate part. Harry named a figure that made the old wandmaker's eyebrows rise toward his wispy hair. That is, more than generous, Mr. Potter. It reflects the true value of your knowledge and reputation, Harry said honestly. And I would add a lifetime position as Master Wandmaker, with an annual stipend that ensures you never need worry about finances again. Ollivander's gaze drifted to the thousands of boxed wands surrounding them. And what of my existing stock? It remains yours to sell, under the new business arrangement. With some adjustments to who qualifies as a customer. The wandmaker nodded slowly, seemingly lost in thought. When he spoke again, his voice had gained strength. There is something fitting about this proposal coming from you, Mr. Potter. The boy with the phoenix feather wand, destined to oppose the darkness. He fixed Harry with that unsettling stare once more. I have made wands for all who needed them, never judging worthiness. But perhaps those days are behind us. Harry held his breath, sensing the wandmaker was on the cusp of decision. I will accept your offer, with one condition, Ollivander said finally. That you preserve the art itself, even as you change who may benefit from it. Relief flooded through Harry. You have my word. They shook hands, the wandmaker's grip surprisingly firm despite his frail appearance. As their hands clasped, Harry felt a strange certainty that he had just taken his first step down a path that would change everything. I'll have the paperwork drawn up immediately, Harry said, rising from his chair. And Mr. Ollivander? Thank you for understanding. The old wandmaker smiled faintly. Understanding is what I do best, Mr. Potter. The wand chooses the wizard, after all. Perhaps it is time we became more selective about which wizards may be chosen. The news broke in the Daily Prophet 3 days later. Potter acquires Ollivanders, boy who lived now Britain's premier wandmaker. The headline screamed across the front page, accompanied by a photograph of Harry and Ollivander shaking hands outside the newly renovated shop. Harry tossed the paper onto Grimmauld Place's kitchen table with a grimace. That was faster than I expected. Hermione looked up from the stack of legal documents she'd been reviewing. Rita Skeeter's byline. She's still as persistent as ever. Ron snorted, mouth full of toast. At least she didn't call you deranged this time. Just ambitious and potentially overreaching. Harry sighed, pouring himself a cup of coffee from the pot creature had left warming. It doesn't matter. The important thing is that we've started. Ollivander seems genuinely relieved to focus on wandcraft without the business concerns. And the new screening process? Hermione asked, shuffling her papers into a neater pile. Already implemented. Anyone seeking a wand must submit to a background check. Former Death Eaters or their close associates are automatically denied. Harry sipped his coffee, grimacing at the bitterness. We've already turned away Goyle Sr. He wasn't pleased. Ron grinned. Wish I'd been there to see his face. It'll get harder from here, Hermione cautioned, ever practical. Ollivander was the logical first step, elderly, no heirs, traumatized by the war. Other wandmakers won't be as receptive. Harry nodded, leaning against the counter. That's why we're approaching Jimmy Kiddell next. His shop's been struggling since Ollivander returned. According to my sources, he's deeply in debt to Gringotts. Your sources? Ron raised an eyebrow. Neville, Harry clarified with a small smile. His grandmother knows everything about everyone's financial situations. It's terrifying, actually. Hermione made a note on her parchment. And after Kiddell? There are 3 other small wandmakers in Britain. Once we secure them, we'll have a complete monopoly on domestic wand sales. Harry set his cup down with purpose. Then we move to the continent. Ron whistled. Ambitious is right. It has to be, Harry said firmly. If we only control British wandmakers, our enemies will just import wands from abroad. We need to control the supply chain completely. Hermione's expression grew troubled. Harry, have you considered the international diplomatic implications? The ministry might overlook domestic acquisitions, but once you start buying foreign wandmakers. I'm counting on it, Harry replied, a hint of steel in his voice. The ministry is still riddled with sympathizers and corrupt officials. Let them show their hands by opposing us. A sharp crack interrupted their conversation as Creature appeared, bowing low. Master has visitors, the house elf announced. Minister Shacklebolt and Aura Robards are waiting in the drawing room. Harry exchanged glances with Ron and Hermione. That was even faster than I expected. Want us with you? Ron asked, already standing. Harry shook his head. No. Keep working on the Kiddell acquisition. I'll handle Kingsley. As Harry climbed the stairs to the drawing room, he mentally prepared his arguments. Kingsley Shacklebolt was a good man and a friend, but he was also a politician now, constrained by the realities of governing a fractured society. The Minister of Magic stood examining the newly restored black family tapestry, his royal blue robes a striking contrast to the room's somber decor. Beside him, Gawain Robards, head of the Auror office, looked distinctly uncomfortable, his weathered face set in grim lines. Minister, Harry greeted, deliberately formal. Auror Robards. To what do I owe this visit? Kingsley turned, his expression serious but not hostile. Harry. Thank you for seeing us without notice. I think you know why we're here. Ollivanders, Harry said simply, gesturing for them to sit. Among other concerns, Kingsley confirmed, settling into an armchair. Your acquisition has raised eyebrows, particularly your new policy of screening wand purchasers. Harry remained standing, preferring the subtle advantage of height. Is there a law against a business owner choosing his customers? Robards cleared his throat. No law, Potter. But wands aren't ordinary merchandise. They're essential magical tools. Essential magical tools that were used to torture and kill during the war, Harry countered, his voice hardening. Tools that are already in the hands of Death Eaters who escaped justice through legal technicalities or ministry incompetence. Kingsley's expression remained neutral, but his eyes reflected understanding. Harry, I sympathize with your frustration. Truly. The reform process has been slower than any of us would like. But taking control of wand-making to impose your own form of justice. Is it justice to let Lucius Malfoy walk free? To watch Thorfinn Rowell rebuild his fortune after what he did to Muggle villages? Harry paced the room, unable to contain his energy. The system is broken, Kingsley. You know it as well as I do. We're fixing it, Robards insisted. Proper channels, proper procedures. Harry laughed, a short, bitter sound. I've heard that for 3 years while watching killers go free. I'm done waiting. Kingsley leaned forward, his deep voice resonating with sincerity. Harry, consider what you're doing. Controlling who can use magic based on your personal judgment, does that not remind you of anything? The implication stung, but Harry had prepared for it. I'm not stopping anyone from using the magic they already have. I'm not imprisoning people without trial. I'm simply refusing to provide new tools to those who've proven they can't be trusted with them. A long silence followed. Kingsley and Robards exchanged glances, clearly reassessing their approach. The Wizengamot is concerned, Kingsley finally said. There's talk of emergency legislation to prevent monopolies in essential magical industries. Now they reached the heart of it. Harry smiled thinly. How interesting that the Wizengamot never concerned itself with the Malfoy family controlling most of the Floop powder production, or the Knots dominating potion ingredients imports. Robards shifted uncomfortably. That's different, because it benefited the right families. Harry interrupted. I'm using wealth the same way they always have. I'm just using it for something that actually helps people. Kingsley sighed, running a hand over his bald head. Harry, I'm not here as your adversary. I'm trying to prevent a situation that could escalate beyond anyone's control. Harry's expression softened slightly. He respected Kingsley, even understood the impossible position the man occupied. I appreciate that, Minister. But I've made my decision. Ollivanders is just the beginning. I intend to ensure that magical power remains in the right hands. And who decides what hands are right? Robards asked pointedly. Harry met his gaze steadily. For now, I do. Along with people I trust. People who fought against Voldemort, not for him. Another silence fell. Kingsley rose, recognizing an immovable position when he saw one. I hope you know what you're doing, Harry. Power, even power exercised with the best intentions, has a way of complicating things. He extended his hand. I'll keep the Wizengamot at bay as long as I can, but be careful. Not all your opponents will be as direct as I am. Harry shook the offered hand. Thank you for the warning. After showing them out, Harry returned to the kitchen, where Ron and Hermione waited expectantly. Well? Hermione asked, closing the book she'd been pretending to read. Exactly what we expected. Concern, a bit of moral lecturing, and a warning about Wizengamot opposition. Harry slumped into a chair. Kingsley's trying to help in his own way, but his hands are tied. Ron frowned. If the Wizengamot passes a law against what we're doing, they won't, Hermione interrupted confidently. I've researched this thoroughly. Magical Britain has no anti-monopoly laws. Creating them now would threaten too many pureblood business interests. They'll bluster and threaten, but actually changing the law would hurt their own power bases. Harry nodded. Besides, we need to move quickly. The more wandmakers we acquire before they can react, the harder it becomes to stop us. He pulled a sheet of parchment from his pocket. I've drafted the offer for Kid Dell. Twice the value of his business, plus a position in the new organization if he wants it. Hermione reviewed the document with a critical eye. This looks appropriate. When do you want to approach him? Tomorrow, Harry said decisively. The sooner the better. Jimmy Kittle's ancient wands occupied a narrow storefront in a side alley off Diagon's main thoroughfare. The location alone spoke volumes about the shop's struggling status, too far from the main traffic flow to attract casual customers, yet not specialized enough to draw dedicated clients. Harry entered alone, having decided that bringing Ron or Hermione might make him appear too aggressive. The bell above the door jingled cheerfully, at odds with the dusty, neglected atmosphere inside. Unlike Ollivanders' organized chaos, Kittle's shop felt genuinely disorganized. Wand boxes were stacked haphazardly, some gathering visible dust. The counter displayed several damaged boxes marked with reduced prices, returned wands or flawed merchandise, Harry guessed. A thin, nervous-looking wizard with a receding hairline emerged from the back room, brushing wood shavings from his robes. His eyes widened comically as he recognized his visitor. Mr. Potter. What an unexpected honor. Kid Dell hurried forward, nearly tripping over a stack of boxes. How may I assist you today? Perhaps a secondary wand? Many wizards find having a backup invaluable. Harry smiled politely. Actually, Mr. Kid Dell, I'm here to discuss a business proposition. The wandmaker's eager expression faltered slightly. Business? I don't understand. May we sit? Harry gestured to the cluttered counter. What I have to say will take a few minutes. Flustered, Kid Dell hastily cleared a pair of stools, muttering apologies about the state of his shop. Once they were seated, Harry came directly to the point. I recently acquired Ollivanders' business, as you may have heard. Kittle's face fell. Yes, it's been difficult to compete since Mr. Ollivander's return. His reputation, well, it's unmatched. A hint of bitterness colored his tone. That's partly why I'm here, Harry continued smoothly. I believe wand-making is too important to be constrained by financial struggles. Master craftsmen should focus on their art, not worry about making rent. Hope flickered in Kittle's eyes. You're suggesting. Harry withdrew a sealed parchment from his robes. I'd like to acquire your business as well, Mr. Kid Dell. For a sum that I believe you'll find more than fair. Trembling slightly, Kid Dell broke the seal and unfolded the document. His eyes bulged as he read the figure written in clear, precise handwriting. This is twice what the shop is worth, even in better days. Your knowledge and craftsmanship are the true assets, Harry said, echoing his approach with Ollivander. The shop is secondary. Kid Dell studied Harry with newfound shrewdness. You've already secured Ollivander. Now me. What exactly are you planning, Mr. Potter? Harry appreciated the direct question. A unified approach to wand-making in Britain. Standardized quality, better working conditions for craftsmen, and, he paused meaningfully, more careful consideration of who should wield such powerful tools. Understanding dawned in Kittle's expression. The new screening process at Ollivanders. That's your doing. It is, Harry confirmed. And I make no apologies for it. Wands should go to worthy witches and wizards, not those who would use them for harm. To Harry's surprise, Kid Dell laughed, a short, bitter sound. Do you know how many times I've sold a wand knowing exactly what sort of wizard was buying it? Dark families who wouldn't go to Ollivander because he saw too much. He gestured around the shabby shop. This is what principles get you in our world, Mr. Potter. Poverty and obscurity. Harry studied the wandmaker with new interest. You've sold to people you didn't trust. When the choice is selling a wand or not making rent. Kid Dell shrugged, a defeated gesture. I told myself it wasn't my responsibility what they did with it afterward. But I never quite believed it. This was an angle Harry hadn't anticipated, the economic pressure forcing wandmakers to compromise their ethics. It added another dimension to his plan. Under my proposal, you'd never face that choice again, Harry said quietly. You'd be compensated fairly for your craft, regardless of sales volume. And you'd never have to put a wand in hands you don't trust. Kid Dell stared at the document, conflict evident on his face. And if I refuse? Then you continue as you are, Harry replied simply. I'm not here to threaten you, Mr. Kid Dell. But I will be acquiring the other wandmakers in Britain. The landscape will change, with or without you. The implication was clear without being explicitly threatening. As part of Harry's organization, Kid Dell would have security and respect. Outside it, he'd face even steeper competition. After a long moment, the wandmaker nodded. I accept your offer, Mr. Potter. On one condition. Yes. I want to help develop your screening process. Determination hardened Kittle's previously anxious features. I've sold to dark wizards. I know their tells, their habits, how they try to disguise their intentions. That knowledge could be valuable to you. Harry smiled, extending his hand. Mr. Kid Dell, I believe this is the beginning of a very productive partnership. Within 2 weeks, Harry had acquired all 5 British wandmakers. The last 3 had proven even easier than Kid Dell, each struggling in their own way against Ollivander's domination of the market. Harry's generous terms and vision for a unified wand-making guild provided both financial security and professional purpose that many had lacked. The wizarding public's reaction had been mixed. Some, particularly those with connections to the Order of the Phoenix or Dumbledore's army, openly supported Harry's initiative. Others, mainly from traditional pureblood families, expressed outrage at what they termed Potter's power grab. The Daily Prophet, predictably, published perspectives from both sides while emphasizing the controversy: Potter's wand-making monopoly, security measure or power play. By Rita Skeeter, the boy who lived has become the man who buys, as Harry Potter's aggressive acquisition of Britain's wandmakers continues to spark debate. While some applaud his stated goal of keeping dangerous magic from unworthy hands, others question whether such power should rest with a private citizen, even one with Potter's heroic credentials. It's unprecedented control over a fundamental magical resource, says Sebastian Selwyn, newly appointed to the Wisingamott's Commerce Committee. Today, Potter decides Death Eaters can't have wands. Tomorrow, who else might he deem unworthy? Potter supporters dismiss such concerns. Harry fought against exactly the kind of prejudice and abuse that Selwyn suggests, says former classmate Neville Longbottom, now a respected Hogwarts professor. This isn't about power. It's about preventing another war. Meanwhile, the Ministry remains conspicuously silent on the legality of Potter's growing monopoly. Harry tossed the paper aside, having read enough. Selwyn, he muttered. Of course he'd be the first to speak out. Hermione looked up from her own reading at Grimmauld Place's dining table, now converted to their operational headquarters. Maps of Europe with wand-making centers marked in red pins covered one wall, while enchanted ledgers tracked the complex financial arrangements required for Harry's acquisitions. Sebastian Selwyn's father was a Death Eater, she noted. Never convicted, but Kingsley told me they found evidence he funded several of Voldemort's operations. Like father, like son, Ron added, entering with a tray of sandwiches Kreacher had prepared. Dad says the younger Selwyn has been quietly building influence in the ministry for months. Very smooth operator, apparently. Not openly anti-Muggle, but always pushing policies that benefit old pure-blood families. Harry nodded grimly. He'll be our main opposition in the Wizengamot. We need to prepare for whatever legislation he proposes. Hermione's quill scratched rapidly across parchment as she made notes. I've already drafted counterarguments for the most likely scenarios. The strongest legal basis for our position is that wand-making has traditionally been an unregulated craft. Creating regulations now would violate centuries of precedent. Speaking of regulations, Ron said between bites of his sandwich, George heard something interesting from a supplier in Diagon Alley. Apparently, there's already talk of black market wands being imported from the continent. Harry's expression darkened. That's moving faster than I expected. All the more reason to expand internationally as quickly as possible. Hermione hesitated, concern evident in her eyes. Harry, we need to discuss the ethical frameworks for our screening process before we expand further. Kid Dell and the others have provided valuable insights, but we need clear guidelines that can't be interpreted as arbitrary or prejudiced. She was right, as usual. What had begun as a simple concept, denying wands to former Death Eaters, had quickly revealed its complexity. What about their family members? What about those who supported Voldemort's ideals but never took the mark? What about the gray areas of coercion and duress? You're right, Harry admitted. We need something better than, I know a Death Eater when I see one. He ran a hand through his perpetually messy hair. Any suggestions? Hermione pulled a thick folder from her expanding briefcase. I've been researching magical contracts and truth detection spells. I think we can create a standardized process that's both fair and effective. As she outlined her proposal, a combination of magical verification, personal history review, and character references, Harry found himself once again grateful for her methodical mind. This was why they had succeeded in defeating Voldemort when so many others had failed, the perfect balance of Harry's instinctive determination, Ron's strategic thinking, and Hermione's brilliant planning. This could work, Harry said when she finished. We implement this system here in Britain, refine it, then use it as our standard when we move to the continent. Ron, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, cleared his throat. Before we start buying up foreign wand makers, there's something else we should consider. He pointed to the map on the wall. Most of these European wand makers are part of ancient guilds or family traditions. They won't sell just for gold, no matter how much we offer. Harry frowned. What are you suggesting? We need leverage, Ron said simply. Something they want that only we can provide. Like what? Hermione asked, looking intrigued by this unexpected strategic insight from Ron. A slow smile spread across Ron's face. Like exclusive access to the finest wand-making materials in the world. Harry's eyes widened as he followed Ron's thinking. We buy up the suppliers, and suddenly, cooperating with us becomes much more attractive, Ron finished with satisfaction. I didn't spend years playing wizard chess without learning something about strategy. Hermione beamed at him with unmistakable pride. Ron, that's brilliant. A faint blush colored Ron's ears, but he looked pleased with himself. The key suppliers are limited: dragon heartstrings from Romania, phoenix feathers from Egypt and India, unicorn hair from protected forests in Norway and Scotland. Most are already controlled by a handful of trading companies. Companies that can be acquired, Harry said, excitement building as the plan took shape. We control the materials, we control the wand makers, without having to buy every single shop in Europe. The conversation continued deep into the night as they refined their strategy. By morning, they had a comprehensive plan: secure the supply chain for premium wand-making materials, establish their ethical screening system as the industry standard, and approach the most influential European wandmakers with offers they couldn't afford to refuse. As dawn broke over London, Harry stood at the window of Grimmauld Place, watching the city slowly come to life. For the first time since the war, he felt a genuine sense of purpose beyond simply surviving or rebuilding. This was proactive, preventative, ensuring that the tools of magical power remained in responsible hands. "Everything all right?" Hermione's voice came softly from behind him. Harry turned to find her watching him with a mixture of concern and affection. Ron had finally succumbed to exhaustion, falling asleep amid their strategic plans. "Just thinking," Harry replied. "About how far we've come. How far we still have to go." Hermione moved to stand beside him, close enough that he could sense the warmth of her presence. "Having second thoughts?" "No," Harry said firmly. "But I'm not naive enough to think this will be easy. We're challenging the entire power structure of the wizarding world." "We've done that before," she reminded him with a small smile. "This is different. Last time, we were fighting a clear evil. This time..." He gestured vaguely. "The lines aren't so clearly drawn. We're making judgments about who deserves access to magic." Hermione was quiet for a moment, considering his words. "Magic isn't a right, Harry. It's a responsibility. That's something the wizarding world has forgotten, that power requires accountability." Harry studied her face in the pale morning light. Somehow, Hermione always managed to distill complex ethical dilemmas into crystal-clear principles. "When did you get so wise?" he asked, only half joking. She laughed softly. "Probably around the time I started breaking into Gringotts and riding dragons with you." The memory brought a genuine smile to Harry's face. Without thinking, he reached out to tuck a wayward strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was simple, natural, yet something shifted between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been building gradually since the war. Hermione's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she covered his hand with her own, holding it against her cheek for a heartbeat longer than friendship required. "We should get some sleep," she said finally, her voice slightly breathless. "Tomorrow will be busy." Harry nodded, reluctantly lowering his hand. "Tomorrow we start changing the world." Again, she added with a smile, before turning away to wake Ron and suggest they all get proper rest. As Harry watched her go, he felt an unexpected certainty amid all the complexities of their undertaking: whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. And somehow, that made all the difference. Sebastian Selwyn's office in the Ministry of Magic reflected its occupant perfectly: elegant without ostentation, traditional without appearing outdated, and arranged to subtly emphasize the power of its inhabitant. Ancient magical texts lined mahogany shelves, their spines bearing titles in languages few modern wizards could read. The desk, positioned to catch the magical light from enchanted windows, was large enough to command respect but not so imposing as to appear insecure. The wizard himself matched this careful balance. In his mid-40s, Selwyn combined aristocratic features with a deliberately approachable manner. His robes, while clearly expensive, were cut in a modern style that avoided the excessive formality favored by older purebloods like Lucius Malfoy. At this moment, Selwyn's carefully cultivated calm was being tested by the report spread before him. "Potter has acquired Gregorovich's supply chain," he said, his voice betraying only mild interest despite the fury building inside him. "Most impressive for someone who spent most of his education barely passing exams." Across the desk, Theodore Knott shifted uncomfortably. Unlike his father, the younger Knott had avoided taking the dark mark, preserving his family's position and fortune through carefully calibrated neutrality during the war. Now, like many pure-blood heirs, he found himself navigating a changed political landscape with diminished influence. "It's worse than that," Knott replied. Potter's representatives have approached unicorn reserves in Norway and dragon sanctuaries in Romania. He's systematically targeting every major source of wand-making materials in Europe. Selwyn tapped long, manicured fingers against his desk. And the Continental Wandmakers Guild? Surely they see the threat. They're divided, not admitted. The French and Germans are alarmed, but the Eastern European crafters are actually receptive to Potter's offers. Many of them have struggled financially for years. Selwyn rose, moving to gaze out his enchanted window, which currently displayed a peaceful view of countryside that existed nowhere in London. Potter is more cunning than we anticipated. Rather than directly challenging established wand makers, he's simply making himself indispensable to their craft. What do you suggest? Not asked, the question carrying the deference of a younger man to a recognized leader. Selwyn turned, his expression thoughtful. For now, we observe and prepare. The Wiesengemot route is temporarily closed to us. Too many members have financial interests that would be threatened by anti-monopoly legislation. A slight smile touched his lips. But there are other avenues. He returned to his desk, pulling a blank piece of parchment from a drawer. I believe it's time I arranged a meeting with our friends at the International Confederation of Wizards. Potter may have influence in Britain, but international magical regulations are beyond even his famous reach. Knott nodded, recognizing his dismissal. At the door, however, he paused. There's one more thing. Potter's screening system, it's more sophisticated than simple discrimination against former supporters of the Dark Lord. They're using some kind of enhanced truth detection combined with magical contracts. Interest flickered in Selwyn's eyes. Can it be circumvented? Not easily. But I've heard rumors that Antonin Dolahov's cousin in Ukraine has been experimenting with methods to defeat such detection. Find out more, Selwyn instructed. Discreetly. After Knott departed, Selwyn remained at his desk, quill poised above parchment as he considered his approach. Potter's initiative threatened everything the pureblood families had been quietly rebuilding since the Dark Lord's fall. Without ready access to wands, their power would gradually diminish, leaving them vulnerable to the progressive reforms Shacklebolt's ministry was implementing. More personally, it threatened Selwyn's own carefully laid plans. Unlike his father, Sebastian had recognized that open-blood supremacy was no longer viable. The future belonged to those who could adapt, preserving traditional values beneath a veneer of modernity and tolerance. He had spent 3 years cultivating the perfect public image, the reformed pureblood, embracing change while subtly guiding it away from truly revolutionary directions. Potter's sudden move had blindsided not just Selwyn, but the entire traditional power structure. Beginning to write, Selwyn drafted his letter to Madame Rousseau of the ICW's trade division. The French which had made her disdain for Britain's provincial, magical community clear on multiple occasions. She would be a natural ally against Potter's expanding influence. As he wrote, Selwyn permitted himself a small, satisfied smile. Potter might have defeated the Dark Lord, but he was still, at heart, a Gryffindor, bold, direct, and predictable in his righteousness. Such men were always vulnerable to those who understood the subtler paths to power. The game was just beginning. The headquarters of Gregorovich Zauberstab occupied an imposing stone building in Vienna's Wizarding district, its Gothic architecture a stark contrast to the Baroque splendor surrounding it. For centuries, the name Gregorovich had represented the pinnacle of Central European wand-making, rivaling even Ollivander in reputation if not in age. Harry stood before the massive oak doors, acutely aware of the significance of this meeting. Acquiring British wand-makers had been relatively straightforward, a matter of financial incentives and shared wartime experiences. The continental wand-makers, with their centuries of tradition and complex guild structures, presented a far greater challenge. Ready? Hermione asked beside him, immaculate in formal robes chosen specifically for this occasion. Her hair was swept into an elegant knot, emphasizing the confidence she had developed in the years since their school days. Harry nodded, adjusting the formal robes that still felt slightly uncomfortable despite Hermione's insistence on their necessity. As I'll ever be. The doors swung open at their approach, revealing a cavernous hall lined with glass cases displaying wands of historical significance. Gregorovich's grandson, Anton, awaited them at the far end, his tall figure silhouetted against stained glass windows depicting the founding of the Central European Wandmakers Guild in 1402. Mr. Potter. Anton Gregorovich's accent was barely noticeable, his English polished by years of international commerce. Miss Granger. Welcome to the House of Gregorovich. They exchanged formal greetings, following the precise etiquette Hermione had researched for this encounter. Anton led them to a private meeting room where an elderly house elf served coffee and delicate pastries before disappearing with a silent pop. I must admit, Anton began, once they were seated, your request for this meeting intrigued me. The great Harry Potter, hero of Britain, suddenly interested in continental wand-making traditions? Most unexpected. Harry smiled diplomatically. My interest isn't sudden, Mr. Gregorovich. It's the culmination of years of consideration regarding magical security and responsibility. Anton's eyebrows rose slightly. Indeed. And how does acquiring wand-making businesses across Europe serve these noble goals? Directly, Harry replied, maintaining eye contact. The recent war demonstrated how easily magical tools can become weapons of terror when wielded by the wrong hands. By establishing consistent standards for who may purchase wands, we can prevent future dark wizards from building power bases. The older man's expression remained skeptical. And you appoint yourself the arbiter of who deserves magical tools? Rather presumptuous, even for the wizard who defeated Voldemort. Hermione smoothly intervened. Not Harry alone, Mr. Gregorovich. We're establishing an ethical oversight committee composed of respected wizards and witches from diverse backgrounds. Your own expertise would be invaluable to such a committee. A subtle flattery, but effective. Anton's expression softened slightly. An interesting proposition. However, Gregorovich wands have been crafted and sold according to the same principles for 6 centuries. Why should we change now? Harry leaned forward. Because the world has changed. The magical community can no longer afford to operate in isolated pockets, each following their own traditions without regard for wider consequences. Voldemort may have focused on Britain, but his ideology found supporters throughout Europe. And beyond, Anton acknowledged reluctantly. Grindelwald before him. Yes, I take your point. He sipped his coffee thoughtfully. Yet I fail to see why this requires selling my family's business to you, Mr. Potter. We could simply adopt screening procedures similar to yours. This was the delicate moment they had prepared for. Harry exchanged a glance with Hermione before proceeding. You could, he agreed. But there are practical considerations that make a unified approach more effective. He paused meaningfully. I believe you've already experienced some supply chain difficulties in recent months. Anton's eyes narrowed. You've acquired Magizoologists International. Among other suppliers, Harry confirmed. Not to restrict access maliciously, but to ensure that premium wand-making materials go to craftsmen who share our commitment to responsible distribution. The wand-maker's expression hardened. Some might call this coercion, Mr. Potter. I prefer to see it as alignment of incentives, Harry replied calmly. Your craftsmanship remains independent. Your creative decisions remain your own. We simply ask that you adopt standardized screening for customers and join a collective committed to keeping dangerous magic from dangerous hands. Anton studied them both for a long moment, his weathered face unreadable. Finally, he sighed. My grandfather would curse me from beyond the grave for even considering this. He believed wand-makers answered to no authority but magic itself. With respect, Hermione said gently, that philosophy belongs to a simpler time. Modern magical society requires greater responsibility. Perhaps. Anton rose, moving to a window overlooking Vienna's magical district. I will need time to consider your proposal. And I must consult with the guild. Of course, Harry agreed, having expected nothing less. We're approaching other guild members as well. This isn't meant to dismantle your traditions, but to strengthen them for a new era. As they prepared to leave, Anton fixed Harry with a penetrating stare reminiscent of his famous grandfather. One question, Mr. Potter, before you go. What happens to wandmakers who refuse your offer? Harry met his gaze steadily. They continue as they always have, Mr. Gregorovitch. But they do so in a market where materials are increasingly difficult to source, and where competitors offer customers greater assurance of ethical standards. He paused. I'm not here to threaten or coerce. I'm offering a partnership that benefits us all, and more importantly, benefits the magical world. Anton nodded slowly. A diplomatic answer. I would expect nothing less from the man who conquered. A faint smile touched his lips. I will contact you with my decision within the week. Outside, as they made their way through Vienna's enchanted streets, Hermione released a breath she seemed to have been holding. That went better than expected. He'll agree, Harry said confidently. He's already experiencing the supply difficulties Ron predicted. By next month, premium phoenix feathers will be nearly impossible to source outside our network. Hermione slipped her arm through his as they walked. 3 down, 12 to go. The continental wandmakers are falling like dominoes. Harry nodded, unable to suppress a surge of satisfaction. Their plan was working even more effectively than anticipated. Already, the screening process had prevented 17 known Death Eater sympathizers from acquiring new wands, and intelligence from Kingsley suggested that Selwyn's faction was growing increasingly desperate. We should celebrate, Harry suggested impulsively. There's a restaurant in the Wizarding Quarter that Ron recommended. Apparently they serve the best schnitzel outside of the German ministry's private dining room. Hermione smiled, a warmth in her eyes that had been appearing more frequently lately. Just the two of us. Ron's overseeing security at the new Ollivander workshop, Harry reminded her. Besides. He hesitated, then pushed forward with Gryffindor courage. I'd like to spend some time with just you. A faint blush colored Hermione's cheeks. I'd like that too. As they turned toward the restaurant, Harry felt a curious lightness despite the weight of their mission. For the first time since the war, he was building something rather than simply reacting to threats. The power that had been thrust upon him, wealth, fame, influence, was finally being channeled toward lasting change. And having Hermione at his side, her brilliant mind complementing his determination, made everything seem possible. News of Harry's expanding wand-making empire traveled quickly through the wizarding world's political circles. By the time Harry and Hermione returned to London, the Daily Prophet was reporting on reactions from across Europe. International concern grows over Potter monopoly. French ministry calls for ICW investigation. The French Ministry of Magic has formally requested an International Confederation of Wizards investigation into Harry Potter's unprecedented consolidation of wand-making businesses. Minister Delacour expressed concern that control of essential magical tools by a private citizen, regardless of reputation, represents a dangerous precedent. Meanwhile, Potter's representatives confirmed the acquisition of 3 additional continental wand makers, bringing the total under his control to 11. Sources close to Potter indicate that his Potter Wandcraft Holdings now controls approximately 60% of Europe's legal wand production. Ministry of Magic spokesperson Percy Weasley issued a statement reiterating that no current British magical law prohibits such acquisitions, while acknowledging ongoing discussions regarding potential regulatory frameworks. Harry set the paper aside as he settled into his chair at Grimmauld Place. The kitchen had been transformed into a command center of sorts, with enchanted maps tracking their acquisitions, screening reports from various wand-making locations, and communication channels to their growing network of employees. Percy's walking a fine line, Ron observed, munching on an apple as he reviewed security reports. Supporting us without actually supporting us. He's doing what he can, Hermione said, sorting through a stack of correspondence. The ministry's divided on our initiative. Kingsley and his inner circle understand what we're doing, but they can't openly endorse it without creating diplomatic incidents. Harry nodded absently, his attention drawn to a particular report. We've had another attempt to circumvent the screening process. Someone tried to use Polyjuice to impersonate Ernie Macmillan at Ollivanders yesterday. Ron straightened. Who? Thorfinn Rowell's youngest brother, Harry replied grimly. The detectors worked perfectly. He's being held for questioning. Since implementing their screening system, they had uncovered 3 separate attempts by former Death Eater associates to obtain wands through deception. Each attempt had been progressively more sophisticated, suggesting organized resistance rather than individual desperation. They're getting smarter, Hermione noted with concern. We need to enhance security at all locations. And accelerate our efforts with the remaining independent wandmakers. Harry agreed. I've scheduled meetings with the Spanish Guild next week. That leaves only the Italian and Nordic traditions outside our network. About that, Ron interjected, sliding a folder across the table. You might want to see this first. Harry opened the folder to find surveillance photographs of Sebastian Selwyn meeting with various continental officials, including Madame Rousseau of the ICW Trade Division. When were these taken? Yesterday, in Geneva, Ron replied. Selwyn's been busy. According to our source, he's pushing for international regulation specifically targeting monopolistic control of magical implements. Hermione frowned. He can't succeed. The ICW has never regulated private business acquisitions before. There's no precedent. There's no precedent for what we're doing either, Harry pointed out. We need to accelerate our timeline. The more wandmakers we control before any regulation passes, the harder it will be to unwind. Ron nodded in agreement. I'll coordinate with Bill to increase our acquisition offers. Might be time to be less subtle about the supply chain leverage too. As they continued planning, a silver lynx Patronus materialized in the center of the kitchen. Kingsley Shacklebolt's deep voice emerged from the glowing apparition, need to speak with you urgently. Selwyn making moves in Weisengamot. Safe House 3, 1 hour. The Patronus dissolved, leaving a momentary silence in its wake. That doesn't sound good, Ron said unnecessarily. Harry was already on his feet. Ron, continue the security enhancements. Hermione, draft contingency plans for possible ICW intervention. I'll meet with Kingsley alone, less conspicuous that way. Hermione rose as well, concern evident in her expression. Be careful. If Selwyn's making bold moves, he may be getting desperate. Harry squeezed her hand reassuringly. I'm always careful. Ron snorted. Since when? Despite the tension, Harry smiled. Some things never changed, and his friend's ability to keep him grounded was one of them. Fine. I'll be appropriately paranoid. Constant vigilance and all that. An hour later, Harry apparat to the designated safe house, a nondescript cottage on the outskirts of a Muggle village in Yorkshire. The protective enchantments recognized his magical signature, allowing him to pass through without triggering alarms. Kingsley waited inside, his tall figure silhouetted against the cottage's small window. Even in casual robes, the minister maintained the dignified bearing that had served him well as both Auror and politician. Harry, he greeted with a nod. Thank you for coming quickly. Your message sounded urgent. Kingsley gestured for Harry to sit. Selwyn has introduced legislation in the Weisengamot that would nationalize all wand-making under ministry control. Harry's eyebrows shot up. That's extreme. Even for him. Desperate times, Kingsley agreed grimly. He's framing it as a national security measure, arguing that wand distribution is too critical to be controlled by private interests, regardless of their intentions. And the Weisengamot's reaction? Mixed. Some of the old guard are horrified at the idea of ministry interference in traditional crafts. Others see the logic in Selwyn's argument. Kingsley's dark eyes studied Harry carefully. The vote is scheduled for next week. It's going to be close. Harry absorbed this information, mind racing through implications and options. Can you delay the vote? Possibly. Parliamentary procedures could buy us a few days, maybe a week. No more. Kingsley hesitated. Harry, I need to know your endgame here. What exactly are you trying to accomplish with this wand-making empire? It was a fair question, one Harry had been refining the answer to as their initiative evolved. Initially, it was simple, keep wands away from Death Eaters and their sympathizers. But it's become something more. Harry leaned forward, intensity in his gaze. The magical world needs structural reform, Kingsley. Not just in Britain, but across Europe. The old systems allowed Voldemort to rise twice, Grindelwald before him. Each time, we defeat the Dark Wizard but leave the conditions that created them intact. And controlling wand-making changes that. Kingsley's tone was neutral, neither endorsing nor dismissing. It's a start, Harry replied. A leverage point to force broader changes. Once we've secured the wand-making network, we'll establish an independent regulatory body, not controlled by me or the Ministry, but by representatives from across magical society. Transparent, ethical, accountable. Understanding dawned in Kingsley's expression. You're not building a monopoly. You're building an institution. Exactly. Harry felt relief at being truly understood. The current system is fragmented, riddled with corruption and old prejudices. We need something new, something that transcends national boundaries and ancient feuds. Kingsley was silent for a long moment, considering. Finally, he nodded slowly. I can work with that vision, Harry. But Selwyn and his allies won't see it that way. To them, you're simply amassing power. Then we need to change the narrative, Harry said decisively. Make our intentions clear before the Wisengamot votes. How do you propose to do that? Harry smiled, an idea forming. I believe it's time I gave an interview to the Quibbler. 3 days later, a special edition of the Quibbler appeared throughout magical Britain. Unlike the publication's usual eclectic content, this issue featured a single story on its cover, Harry Potter Speaks, the truth about the Wandmakers Guild. In an exclusive interview, Harry Potter reveals his vision for a reformed wand-making industry and addresses concerns about his recent acquisitions. This isn't about control, Potter insists. It's about responsibility. The Boy Who Lived describes his plan to establish an independent international wandmakers guild governed by an ethics committee representing diverse magical traditions. No single person or government should control access to magical tools, Potter explains. But neither should we return to a system where wands are sold without consideration of their potential for harm. Potter further announced plans to transition ownership of his wand-making holdings to the new guild once established, retaining only an advisory role. The interview, conducted by Luna Lovegood, presented Harry's vision with surprising clarity and journalistic rigor. Luna's unique perspective allowed her to ask questions others might avoid, resulting in a comprehensive explanation of Harry's motivations and plans. The response was immediate and polarizing. Supporters praised Harry's vision of reform while detractors dismissed it as a smokescreen for a power grab. Most importantly, however, it shifted the terms of debate in the Wisengamot, forcing Selwyn to adjust his strategy. He's called for a delay in the vote, Kingsley informed Harry via secure flow connection. Claims he needs time to review the new information. Harry nodded, unsurprised. He's recalculating. The nationalization argument loses its moral force if I'm already planning to relinquish direct control. Precisely. But don't underestimate him, Harry. Selwyn didn't rise this far without contingency plans. The warning proved prescient. That evening, as Harry reviewed acquisition proposals for the Spanish wandmakers, the wards around Grimmauld Place triggered a proximity alert. Someone was testing the boundaries of the property's magical protections. Harry sent his Patronus to Ron with a brief message, security breach attempt at headquarters. Stand by. Within minutes, Ron's voice came through the enchanted mirror they used for secure communications. 3 wizards at the northern perimeter. Looks like they're trying to map the ward structure. Identification? Not clear yet. They're using concealment charms, but the magical signatures don't match any Death Eaters in our database. Harry considered his options. Don't engage yet. Let's see what they're after. For nearly an hour, the intruders probed the wards surrounding Grimmauld Place, searching for weaknesses in the complex protective enchantments. Harry monitored their progress through detection charms, noting with satisfaction that the security system Hermione had designed was functioning perfectly, feeding the intruders misleading information about the property's defenses. Finally, apparently frustrated by their lack of progress, the unknown wizards retreated. Once they had disapparated, Harry activated the tracking charm that had been subtly attached to their magical signatures. Got them, he murmured as coordinates appeared on the enchanted map in his study. Interesting. The tracking spell had followed the intruders to a townhouse in Knightsbridge, one of the properties listed in Sebastian Selwyn's financial disclosures. Not his primary residence, but a property used for business meetings, according to ministry records. Harry immediately contacted Hermione through their secure channel. We have confirmation. Selwyn's behind the security probe. Her voice came through clearly, concern evident despite the magical distortion. This is escalating faster than we anticipated. Should we alert Kingsley? Not yet, Harry decided after a moment's consideration. We need more information first. Specifically, we need to know what Selwyn's planning next. Harry. Hermione's tone carried a warning. Please don't tell me you're thinking of breaking into Selwyn's property. Not breaking in, Harry clarified. Just a bit of surveillance. Nothing we haven't done before. Her sigh was audible even through the magical connection. That was during a war, Harry. And what do you call this? He countered. Selwyn just tried to breach our headquarters. He's pushing legislation to undermine everything we're building. If he's planning something more aggressive, we need to know. A pause, then, fine. But you're not going alone. I'll meet you at checkpoint 2 in 20 minutes. Harry started to protest but thought better of it. Hermione was right, solo missions had a tendency to go sideways, as their history amply demonstrated. 20 minutes, he agreed. And bring the invisibility sensors. I suspect our friend Selwyn has some interesting security of his own. Selwyn's Knightsbridge townhouse projected an image of Muggle affluence, its Georgian facade immaculately maintained among similarly prestigious properties. To Muggle passers-by, it appeared to be the residence of some wealthy but unremarkable financier or diplomat. Only those with magical sensitivity could detect the subtle protective enchantments woven into its structure. Harry and Hermione, concealed under the invisibility cloak despite having both mastered disillusionment charms years ago, approached cautiously from the small garden behind the property. Hermione's enchanted spectacles revealed layers of magical defenses, some standard ministry-approved protections, others of a decidedly darker nature. Detection wards at the windows, Hermione whispered. And something nasty on the rear entrance, looks like a modified flagranti curse. Harry nodded, unsurprised by the security measures. Standard pureblood paranoia. Can you create an opening? Hermione's wand moved in precise, complex patterns as she analyzed the magical defenses. Yes, but we'll have only about 3 minutes before the system compensates for the disruption. 3 minutes is plenty, Harry assured her, remembering countless infiltrations during the war and their subsequent aura training. With a series of silent spells, Hermione created a temporary vulnerability in the ward structure. They slipped through quickly, finding themselves in a tastefully decorated study lined with bookshelves and anchored by an imposing mahogany desk. Harry immediately moved to the desk while Hermione secured the door with detection charms that would warn them of approaching occupants. Years of working together had made verbal coordination largely unnecessary, they moved with the synchronized efficiency of partners who could anticipate each other's actions. The desk's drawers were locked, but a non-verbal Alohomora from Harry's wand handled the standard locks. The magical protections required more finesse, but after a tense minute of countercharm work, the central drawer slid open. Inside, Harry found a leather portfolio containing correspondence, much of it bearing the official seal of the International Confederation of Wizards. He quickly cast a Geminio charm, creating duplicates of the documents before returning the originals exactly as he'd found them. "Harry," Hermione whispered urgently. "Someone's coming." They barely had time to slip back under the invisibility cloak before the study door opened, revealing Sebastian Selwyn in conversation with a witch Harry recognized as Madame Rousseau of the ICW. "Assured the necessary votes," Selwyn was saying as they entered. "The resolution will pass next week, regardless of Potter's propaganda efforts." Madame Rousseau looked skeptical, her aristocratic features arranged in an expression of polite disbelief. "The British ministry has already indicated its reluctance to interfere. The ministry will fall in line once the ICW establishes clear precedent," Selwyn assured her smoothly. "International regulations supersede national preferences. Shacklebolt knows this. And Potter? He has proven resilient to opposition in the past." Selwyn's smile contained no warmth. "Potter's weakness has always been his predictability. He reacts to threats rather than anticipating them. By the time he mobilizes a response, the regulatory framework will already be in place." Harry felt Hermione tense beside him beneath the cloak. They needed to leave, but the conversation was providing exactly the intelligence they had come for. "The emergency session is scheduled for Monday," Madame Rousseau confirmed, consulting a small appointment book. "I expect confirmation from the German and Spanish delegations by tomorrow." "Excellent." Selwyn moved to a cabinet, retrieving a decanter of amber liquid. "A drink to celebrate our imminent success." As the conversation turned to pleasantries, Harry gently guided Hermione toward their entry point. The ward disruption would close soon, and being trapped inside Selwyn's townhouse would complicate matters considerably. They slipped through the temporary gap in the wards with seconds to spare, feeling the magical defenses snap back into place behind them. Only when they had reached the designated safe apparition point 3 blocks away did they remove the invisibility cloak. "They're convening an emergency ICW session," Hermione said immediately, her mind already racing ahead. "Selwyn's going to push through international regulations before the Waisengamot even votes on his nationalization proposal." Harry nodded grimly. "A two-pronged attack. If the Waisengamot rejects nationalization, the ICW regulations still restrict us. If by some chance the ICW fails, he has the Waisengamot as backup." "Clever," Hermione admitted reluctantly. "We need to see those documents you copied." Back at Grimmauld Place, they spread the duplicated papers across the kitchen table. Ron joined them, having completed his security sweep of their wand-making facilities. "Bloody hell," he muttered as they explained what they'd discovered. "Selwyn's not messing around." The documents revealed the full scope of Selwyn's strategy. The ICW resolution would establish international oversight of all wand-making operations, requiring government licensing in each country and prohibiting cross-border ownership structures exactly like the one Harry had created. "This is comprehensive," Hermione said, impressed despite herself. "He's closing every loophole, addressing every counterargument we might make." Harry studied the draft resolution, noting the careful language that never mentioned him by name yet clearly targeted his operations specifically. "We need to stop this before the emergency session. Once these regulations are in place, unraveling them could take years." "How?" Ron asked practically. "We can't exactly storm the ICW." A determined expression settled over Harry's features, one his friends recognized from their most dangerous moments together. "No. But we can change the game entirely." He pulled a fresh piece of parchment toward himself and began writing rapidly. "Hermione, contact every wandmaker in our network. I need them in London by Saturday. Ron, reach out to Kingsley, we'll need ministry facilities for what I'm planning." His friends exchanged glances, recognizing that Harry had shifted into the decisive mode that had served them well during the war. "What exactly are you planning?" Hermione asked, even as she began making her own notes. Harry looked up, green eyes intense with purpose. We're going to establish the International Wandmakers Guild immediately. Not as a future plan, but as a present reality. And we're going to invite the ICW to witness its founding. Understanding dawned on Ron's face. Brilliant. They can't regulate against something that already exists and solves the very problem they're claiming to address. Exactly, Harry confirmed. Selwyn's counting on us reacting defensively. Instead, we're going to leap ahead of him. As they worked late into the night, developing plans for what would need to be an extraordinarily compressed timeline, Harry felt a familiar sense of clarity. This was what he had always done best, turning apparent disadvantages into decisive action. And this time, rather than merely defending against darkness, he was building something that might prevent it from rising again. The Great Hall of Britain's Magical Crafts Guild had not hosted an international gathering of this magnitude in over a century. Located in a magically expanded space beneath Diagon Alley, the hall's soaring ceilings and ancient stonework provided an appropriately impressive setting for what Harry hoped would be a historic occasion. By Saturday morning, representatives from 23 wand-making traditions had assembled, along with observers from 12 ministries of magic and, crucially, an official delegation from the International Confederation of Wizards. The hasty invitations, bearing Harry Potter's signature and promising an unprecedented initiative to secure the future of wand-making, had generated exactly the curiosity and attendance he had hoped for. Selwyn was present as well, his carefully neutral expression belying the calculation in his eyes as he surveyed the gathering. Madame Rousseau stood nearby, whispering to colleagues from the ICW Trade Division. Harry adjusted his formal robes, suppressing the familiar discomfort he felt at being the center of attention. Some things never changed, regardless of how many years passed since his reluctant celebrity began. "Ready?" Hermione asked quietly at his side, immaculate in formal robes of periwinkle blue that reminded Harry of the Yule Ball so many years ago. He nodded, drawing strength from her presence. "As I'll ever be." At precisely 10 o'clock, Harry stepped onto the raised platform at the front of the hall. The assembled crowd gradually fell silent, all eyes turning to the wizard whose name had dominated magical headlines for weeks. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Harry began, his voice steady and clear. "Particularly those who have traveled internationally to be here today." He paused, surveying the gathered representatives. Ollivanders sat in the front row, his silvery eyes attentive despite his frail appearance. Anton Gregorovitch and other continental wandmakers filled the center section, their expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. The ICW delegation observed from their designated seating, formal and reserved. Many of you have been following recent developments in the wand-making industry with interest or concern. My acquisition of numerous wand-making businesses has generated considerable debate regarding the appropriate governance of our craft. Harry spoke directly, without the political obfuscation that characterized most magical diplomatic gatherings. Some have suggested that my goal is personal control over who may wield magic. His gaze briefly met Selwyn's across the hall. Others have proposed government regulation or nationalization as an alternative. Both perspectives missed the fundamental issue at hand. Harry paused, allowing his next words to carry full weight. The problem is not who controls wand-making. The problem is that wand-making has never been truly accountable to the societies it serves. A murmur ran through the audience. This was not the defensive justification many had expected. For centuries, wand-makers have operated as independent craftsmen, following traditions passed through generations. This independence has preserved ancient knowledge and skills that might otherwise have been lost. Harry nodded respectfully to the wand-makers present. But it has also created a system where no one, not governments, not international bodies, not even the wand-makers themselves, takes full responsibility for the immense power they help channel into the world. The hall had grown completely silent, every person present sensing that they were witnessing something significant. I did not acquire wand-making businesses to control them permanently, Harry continued. I did so to unite them, to create the possibility of a new approach to how we govern the crafting and distribution of magical society's most fundamental tools. With a gesture from Harry, Ron and several assistants moved forward, distributing bound documents to each attendee. Before you is the charter for the International Wandmakers Guild, a self-governing body composed of master craftsmen and ethical oversight representatives from throughout the magical world. The guild will establish and maintain standards for wand-making quality, apprenticeship, and distribution ethics. It will operate independently from any single government or individual, including myself. Harry allowed a moment for the assembled dignitaries to scan the documents before continuing. Under this charter, I will transfer ownership of all wand-making businesses I have acquired to the guild itself, retaining no controlling interest. In return, the guild commits to implementing ethical distribution standards that prevent wands from being sold to those with documented histories of magical violence or supremacist activities. Selwyn rose from his seat, unable to contain himself. This is merely a private organization, Potter. It holds no legal authority. Harry met his gaze calmly. The guild charter includes provisions for official recognition by magical governments and the ICW. Something I believe many present today are prepared to consider. As if on cue, Kingsley Shacklebolt stood. The British Ministry of Magic recognizes the value of this initiative and is prepared to extend formal acknowledgement to the guild, subject to review of its final governance structure. Other ministry representatives nodded in agreement, several rising to express similar sentiments. The French magical ambassador, to Madame Rousseau's visible dismay, particularly emphasized his government's support for innovative approaches to international magical cooperation. Harry returned his attention to the gathered wandmakers. I understand that many of you value your independence and traditions. The guild structure preserves both while adding the strength and resources of a united community. Each tradition maintains its distinctive craftsmanship while benefiting from collective material sourcing, research opportunities, and enhanced security. Ollivander rose slowly, his frail body belying the strength in his voice. As the representative of Britain's oldest wand-making tradition, I endorse this proposal without reservation. The time has come for our craft to embrace both its privileges and its responsibilities. Anton Gregorovich stood next. The continental traditions have always operated more collectively than our British counterparts. This guild structure formalized many practices we already value, while adding protections against political interference that recent history has shown to be necessary. One by one, representatives from wand-making traditions across Europe indicated their support, some enthusiastically, others with careful qualifications that Harry had anticipated and addressed in the charter. Selwyn watched with barely concealed fury as his carefully constructed opposition crumbled. The ICW delegation, reading the room's sentiment, began conferring urgently among themselves. Finally, Harry delivered the decisive stroke. To demonstrate my commitment to this transition, I am prepared to execute the legal transfer of all wand-making assets to the new guild immediately, upon its formal establishment today. The necessary documents have been prepared and verified by Gringotts representatives present in this hall. He gestured to a group of goblins seated near the back, their presence lending financial legitimacy to the proceedings. The guild's initial governing council will include representatives elected today from each wand-making tradition, plus ethics advisors nominated by participating ministries. I will serve as founding patron only, with no direct control over operations or policies. The audacity of the move, presenting not a proposal but a fully formed organization ready for immediate implementation, left Selwyn and his allies without effective counter-arguments. The emergency ICW session scheduled for Monday would now be addressing an established reality rather than a theoretical concern. For the next hour, the Assembly discussed specific provisions of the Charter, suggesting modifications that Harry and Hermione had largely anticipated in their planning. By mid-afternoon, the final document had been approved by an overwhelming majority of those present. In a formal ceremony that combined traditions from various magical cultures, the International Wandmakers Guild was officially established. Harry signed the transfer documents with a ceremonial quill, legally relinquishing control of his wand-making empire to the newly formed guild. As the proceedings concluded and the hall filled with conversation, Kingsley made his way to Harry's side. "Impressively done," the minister said quietly. Selwyn didn't know what hit him. Harry watched as the man in question exited the hall, his face a mask of controlled anger. He'll regroup. This isn't over. No, Kingsley agreed. But you've changed the battlefield completely. The ICW can hardly justify emergency regulations against an organization that already implements the very standards they would propose. Hermione joined them, satisfaction evident in her expression despite her professional demeanor. The Spanish delegation just confirmed their withdrawing support for Monday's emergency session. Without them, Selwyn's coalition falls apart. Harry nodded, allowing himself to feel a moment of accomplishment. The Wandmakers Guild represented exactly what he had envisioned from the beginning, not personal control, but systemic reform. A structure that could outlast any individual, dedicated to ensuring magical power remained in responsible hands. There's still work to do, he reminded them. The guild needs to establish itself, prove its effectiveness. And Selwyn won't give up easily. One battle at a time, mate, Ron said, approaching with glasses of champagne that had appeared for the celebratory reception. Today's a win. Enjoy it. Harry accepted the glass, looking around at what they had accomplished. Wandmakers who had been competitors for centuries were now engaged in animated discussions about collaborative possibilities. Ministry representatives were establishing connections with guild members from other countries. Even the ICW delegation had shifted from skepticism to cautious engagement. To the guild, Hermione said, raising her glass in a toast. Harry smiled, clinking his glass against hers. To making sure we never need another boy who lived. As the reception continued around them, Harry found himself watching Hermione as she engaged passionately with a group of international representatives, her intelligence and conviction evident in every gesture. The feelings he had been gradually acknowledging over recent months crystallized in that moment, admiration deepening into something much more profound. Some changes, it seemed, were more personal than political. But no less revolutionary for that. Chapter 2, Power and Resistance. Twilight settled over the ancient forests of the Black Forest as Harry stood at the edge of a clearing, watching the Wandmaker work. Dieter Holzmann moved with practiced precision, his weathered hands caressing the trunk of an ancient yew tree, whispering words too soft for Harry to hear. The old German's rituals differed dramatically from Ollivanders' clinical approach or Gregorovich's mathematical precision. After several minutes of communion with the tree, Holzmann finally withdrew a small silver knife from his robes. With reverent care, he cut a single branch no thicker than Harry's finger, murmuring thanks to the ancient tree as he worked. The tree must be honored, Holzmann explained as they walked back toward his workshop, the harvested branch wrapped carefully in silk. We take only what is freely given. In the old ways, the wand begins its life with respect, not conquest. Harry nodded, fascinated by this glimpse into a wand-making tradition that predated the Roman conquest of Germania. This is why your wands have such affinity for nature magic. You've studied our craft. Holzmann seemed pleased, his initially suspicious demeanor warming slightly. Most British wizards assume Ollivanders' methods are the only valid approach. That's exactly why I'm here, Harry replied as they entered the workshop, a circular building of stone and timber that blended almost seamlessly with the surrounding forest. Each wand-making tradition holds unique wisdom. The guild should preserve these differences, not homogenize them. Holzmann grunted noncommittally as he placed the yew branch in a stone basin filled with clear water. Pretty words, Potter. But centralization inevitably leads to standardization. Not if the structure is built to prevent it. Harry watched as the branch began to emit a faint silver glow in the water. The guild charter explicitly protects traditional methods while providing shared resources and security. The German wandmaker measured Harry with keen blue eyes that had seen nearly a century of magical history. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? A conqueror? Or a bureaucrat? Holzmann shrugged. Instead, you speak of preservation and diversity while building the largest magical business enterprise since the Goblin Banking Consortium. Harry smiled slightly. I've never been particularly good at meeting expectations. This earned a genuine chuckle from the old wandmaker. So I've heard. Very well, let us discuss your guild proposal in detail. I have questions about material sourcing and apprenticeship standards. As they settled before the workshop's hearth, Harry felt a familiar sense of cautious optimism. Holzman represented the most traditional faction of European wandmakers, craftsmen who operated largely outside formal magical governance, maintaining practices that dated back to pre-Roman times. His support would bring legitimacy that gold alone could never purchase. The negotiations continued long into the night, covering everything from harvesting rituals to customer screening protocols. By dawn, Harry had secured not only Holzman's participation in the guild but his commitment to serve as elder representative for the Germanic traditions. As he prepared to port key back to their temporary headquarters in Vienna, Harry felt the weight of the enchanted journal in his pocket grow suddenly warm, Hermione's signal that something required his immediate attention. He excused himself and stepped outside to activate the communication charm. Hermione's neat handwriting appeared on the previously blank page, assassination attempt against Rousseau at ICW headquarters in Geneva. Ministry sources indicate she's claiming you're responsible. Return immediately. We'll brief you fully upon arrival. Harry's blood ran cold. He had expected opposition, even indirect attacks, but an assassination attempt attributed to him? This changed everything. Trouble? Holzman asked from the doorway, observing Harry's expression with shrewd eyes. It appears so, Harry replied, seeing no reason to hide what would soon be international news. Someone's tried to kill Madame Rousseau of the ICW and is apparently blaming me for it. The old wandmaker's face darkened. The ancient game begins again. Different players, same moves. He reached into his robes and withdrew a small wooden talisman. Take this. German wandmakers have long been targets of those who fear our independence. This will warn you of poisons and most direct magical attacks. Harry accepted the gift with appropriate gravity. Thank you. I hope I won't need it. Hope for sunshine while carrying an umbrella, young Potter. Holzman's weathered face creased in a grim smile. Your enemies won't wait for rain. The Vienna safehouse hummed with tense activity when Harry arrived. Ron directed a team of security specialists reinforcing the building's protective enchantments, while Hermione coordinated communications with guild representatives across Europe. The establishment of the International Wandmakers Guild had necessitated an expansion of their core team, though the most sensitive operations remained exclusively in the hands of those Harry trusted implicitly. What do we know? Harry asked without preamble as he joined Hermione at the command table. Madame Rousseau was attacked in her private office at the ICW, Hermione replied, sliding a file across the table. A cursed package that exploded when opened. She survived with minor injuries, but her assistant is in critical condition. Harry scanned the preliminary report, his frown deepening. And she's claiming I'm behind it? Not directly, Ron interjected, joining them after delegating the security enhancements. She's suggesting the newly formed guild is eliminating opposition through methods reminiscent of Death Eater tactics. Your name isn't mentioned specifically, but the implication is clear, Harry finished grimly. Clever. Attack your strongest critic and frame you for it in one move. Hermione nodded. Selwyn's fingerprints are all over this, though of course there's no direct evidence. The timing is too perfect, just as we're gaining momentum with the guild. What's the international reaction? Harry asked, already considering potential responses. Mixed. Hermione gestured to the communications hub where magical dispatches from across Europe were being monitored. Our allies are publicly defending the guild. Kingsley released a statement expressing full confidence in your integrity. The German ministry has pointedly mentioned Rousseau's history of anti-British sentiment. And the opposition? Ron grimaced. The French ministry is calling for an ICW investigation into guild activities. Several conservative factions are using this to question the wisdom of centralizing wand-making under potentially unstable leadership. Harry paced the room, mind racing through implications and options. This attack changed the nature of their struggle. No longer simply political or economic, the opposition had escalated to direct violence, while framing Harry as the aggressor. "We need to get ahead of this," he decided. "Hermione, draft a guild statement condemning the attack and offering full cooperation with any investigation. Ron, coordinate with Kingsley to arrange secure transportation for key guild representatives, they've just become targets." Both nodded, immediately moving to implement his instructions. Harry turned to the enchanted map dominating one wall, displaying the current status of wand-making facilities throughout Europe. Nearly 70% now operated under guild authority, with negotiations ongoing for most of the remainder. "Harry." Hermione's voice drew his attention back. "There's something else you should see." She handed him a sealed parchment bearing the official crest of the French Ministry of Magic. "This arrived by diplomatic courier 10 minutes ago. For your eyes only." Harry broke the seal, scanning the elegant script with growing disbelief. "They're requesting my presence in Paris tomorrow for informal discussions regarding recent events." He looked up at Hermione. "It's signed by Minister Delacour himself." Fleur's father-in-law, Ron noted with surprise. "That's unexpected." "It's either a trap or an opportunity," Hermione said cautiously. "Minister Delacour has maintained public neutrality regarding the guild, despite pressure from traditionalists in the French magical community." Harry reread the carefully worded invitation. "He's offering diplomatic protection for the visit. That suggests good faith." "Or excellent bait," Ron countered. "Remember, the French ministry still employs Madame Rousseau's brother as security director." Harry considered their points, weighing risk against potential benefit. "If Delacour wanted to move against us, he wouldn't need to lure me to Paris. This feels like a genuine attempt at dialogue." "Then you should go," Hermione said decisively. "But not alone. I'll accompany you as guild counsel." A hint of pink touched her cheeks as she added, "Besides, my French is better than yours." Harry couldn't help smiling despite the circumstances. "Your everything is better than mine, Hermione." The comment earned a surprised laugh from Ron, who raised his eyebrows suggestively. "Should I leave you two alone, then?" Hermione's blush deepened as she swatted Ron's arm. "Oh, stop it. We need to prepare for tomorrow. The French are sticklers for diplomatic protocol." As they shifted focus to planning the Paris meeting, Harry felt a curious mixture of tension and excitement. The attempt to frame him for violence was a serious escalation, yet Minister Delacour's invitation suggested that not all doors were closing. And working alongside Hermione, watching her brilliant mind navigate complex diplomatic challenges, created its own kind of anticipation. The game, as Holzman had said, was beginning again. But this time, Harry was playing several moves ahead. The French Ministry of Magic occupied an expansion charm beneath the Louvre, combining classical architecture with magical innovation in a manner distinctly more elegant than its British counterpart. Harry and Hermione, accompanied by a small security detail, were escorted through gilded corridors by a protocol officer whose formal robes and precise manner epitomized French magical bureaucracy. "Minister Delacour awaits you in the Flamel Chamber," their guide announced, stopping before an ornate doorway guarded by two wizards in the midnight blue uniforms of the French Magical Security Division. "Your security personnel must remain outside, as per diplomatic custom." Harry nodded to their guards, who took positions in the antechamber as he and Hermione were ushered into a stunning circular room. Unlike the ostentatious grandeur of the ministry corridors, the Flamel Chamber projected understated power through simplicity, walls of pale stone inlaid with alchemical symbols in silver and gold, illuminated by enchanted light that seemed to emanate from the stone itself. Minister Jean-Claude Delacour rose from behind a round table of polished oak as they entered. In his early 60s, the minister carried himself with the natural dignity that characterized much of French magical aristocracy. His resemblance to his daughter Fleur was subtle but unmistakable in the fine bone structure and penetrating blue eyes. "Mr. Potter. Miss Granger." He greeted them in lightly accented English, extending his hand. Thank you for accepting my invitation on such short notice. Thank you for extending it, Minister, Harry replied, shaking the offered hand. Particularly given recent events. Delacour gestured for them to be seated. Recent events are precisely why this conversation is necessary. He switched to French, addressing Hermione directly. I understand you are fluent in our language, Miss Granger. Perhaps you would prefer to continue in French? Hermione responded in flawless French, her accent drawing an appreciative nod from the minister. I'm comfortable in either language, Minister Delacour. Whatever serves our discussion best. English, then, for Mr. Potter's benefit, Delacour decided, reverting to his accented but precise English. Though I commend your linguistic abilities, Miss Granger. Few British wizards bother to master other magical languages. A house elf appeared silently, serving coffee in delicate porcelain cups before disappearing with a barely perceptible pop. Harry noted that unlike British house elves, the creature wore a simple but elegant uniform bearing the French ministry crest, a small but telling cultural difference. I will be direct, Mr. Potter, Delacour began once they were settled. The attempt on Madame Rousseau's life has created a diplomatic crisis that threatens the stability of European magical cooperation. While I do not personally believe you were involved, the narrative being constructed is compelling to those already concerned by your unprecedented activities. I appreciate your candor, Minister, Harry replied. And your willingness to hear my perspective directly rather than through diplomatic channels. Delacour inclined his head. France has not forgotten that our liberation from Grindelwald's influence came at the hands of a British wizard. Nor have we forgotten that your defeat of Voldemort protected magical communities far beyond Britain's shores. A hint of steel entered his voice. But good deeds do not grant unlimited license, Mr. Potter. Your accumulation of power through the Wandmakers Guild has awakened historical anxieties throughout Europe. The guild was established specifically to prevent the concentration of power in any single person's hands, Hermione interjected. Including Harry's. The charter explicitly, Delacour raised a hand, interrupting gently but firmly. I have read the charter, Miss Granger. It is an impressive document in principle. But principles must be measured against practical realities. He turned his attention back to Harry. You have created an organization that controls access to magical tools across national boundaries, answerable to neither democratic governance nor traditional authority. Surely you understand why this generates concern. Harry met the minister's gaze directly. I understand the concern. But I also understand the threat that motivated our actions. The existing system failed to prevent 2 wizarding wars within a generation. It failed to keep wands from the hands of those who used them for terror and murder. And you appointed yourself the solution to this failure? There was no accusation in Delacour's tone, only genuine inquiry. Someone had to act, Harry replied simply. The guild is not my personal fiefdom, Minister. It's a framework for responsible distribution of magical power that transcends national interests and pure-blood politics. Delacour studied him for a long moment. You believe in this vision quite sincerely. I do. Then perhaps we can find common ground. The minister steepled his fingers. France is not opposed to reform, Mr. Potter. Our own magical traditions have evolved continuously since the Revolution. But we require assurance that the Guild will respect national sovereignty while pursuing its mission. Harry exchanged a quick glance with Hermione, who gave an almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. What specific assurances would satisfy France's concerns, Minister? A hint of a smile touched Delacour's lips. Direct, as promised. Very well. He produced a sealed document from his robes. This contains 3 provisions that, if incorporated into the Guild Charter, would allow me to formally endorse your organization before the ICW. Hermione accepted the document, scanning its contents with practiced efficiency. These appear reasonable at first glance. French representation on the Guild's Ethics Council, reciprocal reporting of security threats, and... She paused, eyebrows rising slightly. Ah. Immunity from guild restrictions for certain ministry officials. A practical necessity, Delacour explained smoothly. There are security functions that require absolute confidence in magical access. Harry considered the implications. The first two provisions strengthened the guild's legitimacy while creating valuable security cooperation. The third, however, potentially undermined the guild's core purpose by exempting certain individuals from screening. We can incorporate the first two provisions immediately, Harry decided. The third requires modification. We cannot exempt individuals based solely on position, but we can establish an expedited review process for verified security personnel. Delacour's expression revealed nothing. That may be insufficient. It's the most we can offer while maintaining the guild's integrity, Harry countered. But I'm willing to discuss specific security concerns in greater detail. A tense silence followed as the French minister weighed the response. Finally, he nodded. A reasonable starting position. My security advisors will provide detailed requirements for your consideration. The meeting continued for another hour, delving into technical aspects of guild operations and French magical regulations. Throughout, Harry was struck by Delacour's combination of diplomatic skill and genuine concern for magical security. Unlike Selwyn's naked power plays or Rousseau's ideological opposition, the French minister appeared genuinely interested in finding workable solutions. As the discussion concluded, Delacour rose to his feet. You have given me much to consider, Mr. Potter. I believe progress is possible, despite recent complications. Thank you for your willingness to engage directly, Minister, Harry replied, standing as well. The Guild values France's magical traditions and seeks partnership, not dominance. Delacour escorted them personally to the ministry's diplomatic apparition point. As they prepared to depart, he addressed Harry one final time, his voice lowered for privacy. A word of caution, Mr. Potter. Not all who oppose you will do so through diplomatic channels. Madame Rousseau has powerful allies beyond official circles. Take care in your movements, particularly in Paris. Harry nodded, appreciating the warning. Thank you, Minister. It is selfish, perhaps. A faint smile touched Delacour's features. My daughter-in-law speaks highly of you. It would distress her family greatly should harm come to you on French soil. With that cryptic statement, he stepped back, allowing Harry and Hermione to activate their return port key. That went surprisingly well, Hermione commented as they materialized in their Vienna headquarters. Delacour seems genuinely interested in cooperation. Harry nodded, removing his formal robes with relief. He's a politician, but an honest one. Rare combination. Ron looked up from the security monitors he'd been supervising during their absence. So France isn't entirely against us? Not entirely, Harry confirmed. Delacour has conditions, but they're mostly reasonable. If we can bring France into alignment with Germany and Britain, the Guild's position strengthens considerably. Hermione was already reviewing her notes from the meeting. We should implement the first two provisions immediately as a show of good faith. The third will require careful negotiation. As they debriefed the team on the Paris meeting, reports continued arriving from Guild representatives throughout Europe. The Italian wand-making families remained hesitant, citing centuries of independence. The Nordic traditions expressed cautious interest but raised concerns about the Guild's screening criteria for their unique magical communities. It's progressing, Harry observed, studying the enchanted map that tracked their diplomatic efforts. Slower than we'd like, but steadily. Speaking of progress, Ron interjected, we've confirmed the source of the cursed package sent to Rousseau. He handed Harry a sealed intelligence report. Not what we expected. Harry opened the file, scanning its contents with growing disbelief. This can't be right. Double verified, Ron confirmed grimly. The cursed object originated from Borgin and Burke's in Nocturne Alley. Specifically, from their private collection of dark artifacts. Borgin works exclusively with pure-blood clientele, Hermione noted, reading over Harry's shoulder. Particularly those with traditional values. The implications were disturbing. If Selwyn or his allies had orchestrated an attack on Rousseau using dark artifacts traceable to Britain, they were playing a more complex game than simple opposition. They were deliberately manufacturing evidence to support the narrative that Harry had reverted to Death Eater tactics. We need to inform Kingsley immediately, Harry decided. And strengthen our counterintelligence efforts. If they're willing to attack their own allies to frame us, no one is safe. Ron nodded in agreement. Already on it. Bill's team is implementing enhanced security protocols for all guild facilities. We've also expanded background checks for everyone with access to sensitive information. As they discussed security measures, Harry noticed Hermione had grown unusually quiet, her brow furrowed in concentration as she reviewed the intelligence report. "What is it?" he asked, recognizing her expression from countless situations where she'd identified something others had missed. "The timing," she replied slowly. Borgin and Burke's was raided by Aurors 3 weeks ago as part of ongoing Death Eater investigations. According to Ministry records, all dark artifacts were confiscated. Harry's eyes widened as he followed her thinking. So either the Ministry records are falsified, or someone with Auror access obtained the cursed object during the raid and redirected it for this attack, Hermione finished grimly. The revelation cast their situation in an even darker light. If Selwyn had collaborators within the Auror office itself, their security challenges had just multiplied exponentially. "We need to compartmentalize," Harry decided after a moment of tense silence. "Restrict sensitive information to those we personally trust. And accelerate our guild expansion. The stronger our legitimate foundation, the harder it becomes to undermine us through these tactics." Ron and Hermione nodded in agreement, already formulating plans to adapt to this new threat. As they worked into the night, Harry found himself reflecting on how naturally they had fallen back into their wartime patterns, anticipating threats, adjusting strategies, protecting each other. Some things, it seemed, never changed. Even in ostensible peacetime, they were fighting a shadow war against those who would preserve the old order at any cost. The next 2 weeks saw Harry dividing his time between diplomatic negotiations and security enhancements. With Selwyn's faction escalating their tactics, each new guild acquisition required increasingly sophisticated protective measures. Yet despite these challenges, or perhaps because of them, the guild continued to expand its influence. The French wandmakers, following Minister Delacour's cautious endorsement, joined the guild as a semi-autonomous regional council. The Nordic traditions followed after securing cultural protections for their unique screening processes. Even the notoriously independent Italian families began preliminary discussions, sensing the shifting balance of power in European wand-making. Through it all, Harry found unexpected support in Hermione's growing closeness. What had begun as professional partnership had gradually evolved into something deeper, expressed in small moments amidst their hectic schedule, her hand lingering on his when passing documents, shared glances that communicated without words, late nights discussing strategy that drifted into more personal conversations. They were returning from a particularly successful meeting with Spanish wandmakers when Harry finally acknowledged what had been building between them for months. "Have dinner with me tonight," he said abruptly as their portkey delivered them to the Vienna headquarters. "Not here. Not discussing guild business or security protocols. Just, dinner." Hermione looked momentarily startled, then a soft smile spread across her face. "Are you asking me on a date, Harry Potter?" "Yes," he admitted, feeling oddly nervous despite everything they'd faced together. "I am." Her smile widened. "About time. I thought I might have to use a confundus charm to give you the idea." Harry laughed, relief washing through him. "That obvious, was it?" "Only to everyone with eyes," she replied dryly. "Ron's been making sickening romantic gestures behind your back for weeks." "Traitor," Harry muttered, though without heat. "So, that's a yes." Hermione's expression softened. "Of course it's a yes. Though we'll need to inform our security detail if we're leaving headquarters." This was their reality now. Even personal moments required tactical considerations. But Harry was determined to create space for something beyond their mission, however briefly. Already arranged, he admitted. There's a magical restaurant in Vienna's old quarter. Completely secure, very private. Ron helped set it up. Did he now? Hermione raised an eyebrow. Exactly how long have you been planning this? Since Paris, Harry confessed. Watching you negotiate with Delacour in fluent French while systematically dismantling his diplomatic traps was impressive. A blush colored Hermione's cheeks. Most men don't find multilingual legal negotiations romantic. I'm not most men, Harry replied simply. No, she agreed softly. You're definitely not. The restaurant, Zum Golden and Zauberstab, occupied the magically expanded upper floors of a medieval building in Vienna's historic district. Accessible only to magical patrons through an enchanted doorway, it offered exquisite Austrian cuisine in private dining alcoves secured by discretion charms. Harry had arranged for the most secluded setting, a balcony overlooking the city's twinkling lights, protected by weather charms that maintained a perfect spring evening atmosphere despite the autumn chill. This is beautiful, Hermione commented as they were seated, her simple evening dress a dramatic contrast to the formal robes she'd worn for diplomatic functions. I've been in Vienna for weeks and barely seen the city. We've been rather busy, Harry agreed, relaxing for what felt like the first time in months. With Ron personally overseeing their security detail and the restaurant's own protective enchantments, they could afford this brief respite. The meal progressed with a surprising naturalness, their conversation drifting away from guild matters to personal reflections, shared memories, and occasional laughter at the absurdity of their current circumstances. Did you ever imagine this is where we'd end up? Hermione asked as they enjoyed dessert. When we were at Hogwarts, I mean. Harry considered the question. Honestly? No. I mostly imagined surviving until graduation. The future was abstract. And now you're restructuring the entire European wand-making industry. She shook her head with a fond smile. While fighting off political conspiracies and assassination attempts. Somehow both completely unexpected and entirely predictable for you. For us, Harry corrected gently. I wouldn't be doing any of this without you and Ron. Hermione's expression grew thoughtful. We've always been a good team. But this is different from hunting Horcruxes. We're building something, not just destroying evil. That's what makes it worth doing, Harry agreed. After Voldemort, I couldn't just go back to normal life. There had to be something more, something that prevented the next Dark Lord rather than waiting to fight them. Is that why you left the Aura program? She asked, referring to his brief post-war career attempt. Harry nodded. Partly. I realized I was training to fight symptoms rather than causes. Dark wizards emerge from systems that enable them, pure-blood politics, corrupted institutions, unaccountable power. He smiled ruefully. I sound like you now. I've been a good influence, Hermione teased, reaching across the table to take his hand. Though I think you've always understood power better than you admit. You just needed to find your own way to use it. The touch of her hand sent a warmth through Harry that had nothing to do with magic. For a moment, they simply existed in comfortable silence, the weight of their shared history and current purpose creating an intimacy beyond words. Hermione, Harry began, his voice soft. I want you to know, the shattering of their privacy charm interrupted him mid-sentence. Ron's voice came through the magical communication device they all carried, security breach at headquarters. Multiple attackers. Get to extraction point immediately. They were on their feet instantly, wands drawn as they moved toward the emergency port key location the restaurant maintained for VIP guests. Years of facing danger together made explanations unnecessary, they moved in perfect synchronization, Hermione maintaining a shield charm while Harry secured their exit path. The restaurant's security wizard met them at the designated apparition point, his expression grave. We've secured the building, but reports indicate coordinated attacks at multiple guild locations. Your port key is ready. Harry exchanged a quick glance with Hermione. Thank you. Please ensure all your staff remain inside until the all-clear signal. Seconds later, they materialized at their secondary headquarters, a magically reinforced facility beneath an unassuming office building in Prague. The command center buzzed with urgent activity as Guild security personnel coordinated responses to what appeared to be a synchronized assault on their European network. Ron hurried toward them, his expression a mixture of relief and tension. Thank Merlin you're safe. They hit Vienna hard, breached the outer wards before our security team contained them. Similar attacks at the Paris and Berlin facilities. Casualties? Harry asked immediately, already moving toward the tactical displays. 2 security personnel injured in Vienna, none critical. 1 wandmaker wounded in Paris, French Aurors responded quickly. Ron handed them situation reports. No fatalities, but it was close. These weren't random attacks, Harry. They knew exactly where to hit and when. Hermione was already analyzing the incident maps. Coordinated timing across 3 countries. This wasn't Selwyn acting alone. This required resources beyond even his connections. Harry studied the attack patterns with growing concern. This is professional. Military precision. He looked up at Ron. Who has that kind of capability in the wizarding world? Not many, Ron admitted grimly. Former hit wizards. Maybe some of the Continental Security Services. Definitely not ordinary Death Eater sympathizers. The implications were disturbing. If Selwyn had recruited professional magical operatives for direct attacks on Guild facilities, the conflict had escalated beyond political maneuvering to something approaching open warfare. We need to inform the ministries immediately, Hermione decided. These attacks occurred on sovereign magical territory. Whatever Selwyn hoped to accomplish, he's crossed from political opposition to criminal action. Harry nodded in agreement, but something about the situation nagged at him. The timing is too convenient. Just as we're gaining momentum with the French and Nordic traditions. He turned to Ron. Any progress identifying the attackers? 1 captured in Vienna, Ron confirmed. Being interrogated by Austrian magical security now. No identification on him, but his tactics match Eastern European mercenary protocols. Hired wands, Harry muttered. Deniable assets. As they processed this information, Bill Weasley entered the command center, his scarred face set in grim lines. As head of their counterintelligence division, he'd been coordinating with magical law enforcement across Europe. The Vienna prisoner talked, he announced without preamble. Gave up his employer after the Austrians applied pressure. Selwyn? Harry asked. Bill shook his head. Interestingly, no. He claims they were hired by someone representing the Continental Security Collective, a group I've never heard of. Hermione frowned. That sounds like a front organization. Exactly, Bill agreed. But here's where it gets interesting. The money trail leads back to an account at Gringotts Paris that's controlled by the Rousseau family. Silence fell as they processed this revelation. Madame Rousseau had been their most vocal opponent at the ICW, but orchestrating armed attacks represented a dramatic escalation beyond diplomatic opposition. This makes no sense, Hermione said finally. Rousseau is a bureaucrat, not a revolutionary. Why would she risk her position with something this blatant? Unless she's not acting alone, Harry suggested, connecting pieces mentally. What if Selwyn and Rousseau are working together? He provides the strategy, she provides international legitimacy and resources. Ron nodded slowly. That tracks with what we know. Selwyn meets with her regularly, but always in public, always plausibly deniable. We need more information before we act, Harry decided. Hermione, work with Bill to compile everything we have on Rousseau's connections. Ron, enhance security at all remaining facilities, they may try again. I'll contact Kingsley and Minister Delacour directly. If Rousseau is coordinating attacks on magical facilities across national boundaries, both ministries need to know. As they dispersed to their tasks, Harry felt a grim determination settling over him. The stakes had escalated dramatically, but so had the clarity of their opposition. Selwyn and his allies had abandoned subtlety for direct aggression, a tactical error that would ultimately work in the guild's favor. Political maneuvering could be dismissed as procedural disputes. Armed attacks on legitimate magical businesses required ministerial response. By escalating to violence, their opponents had inadvertently strengthened the guild's position as victims rather than aggressors. Now Harry needed to leverage that advantage while ensuring no guild members paid the ultimate price for their enemies' desperation. The French ministry's response to the attacks came swiftly and decisively. Within 24 hours of Harry's emergency meeting with Minister Delacour, Madame Rousseau had been suspended from her ICW position pending investigation. French Aurors secured her offices and private residences, discovering extensive correspondence with Selwyn and financial records confirming her role in funding the mercenary attacks. The British ministry moved with equal determination, though through different channels. Rather than publicly targeting Selwyn directly, Kingsley authorized expanded Aura investigations into threats against international magical commerce, providing legal cover for unprecedented scrutiny of Selwyn's activities and associates. For Harry and the Guild, the attacks paradoxically accelerated their acceptance across Europe. Wandmakers who had hesitated to align with a controversial British initiative now saw the Guild as a victim of unjustified aggression. Within a week of the coordinated assaults, even the traditionally insular Italian wand-making families had signed provisional membership agreements. Selwyn miscalculated badly, Hermione observed as they reviewed the latest guild expansion reports in their newly secured headquarters, now relocated to a magically fortified estate outside Prague. He thought violence would intimidate independent wand-makers. Instead, it's driving them to seek our protection. Harry nodded, studying the enchanted map that now showed nearly 85% of European wand-making operations under guild protection. He's desperate. The old power structures are slipping away faster than he anticipated. Speaking of which, Ron interjected, entering with a sealed ministry dispatch. Kingsley sent an update on the Selwyn investigation. Apparently our friend has gone missing. Harry accepted the document with a frown. Missing how? Disappeared from his London residence yesterday. Hasn't been seen at the ministry or any of his known properties. Ron shrugged. Could be running, could be regrouping. Or planning something dramatic, Harry added grimly. Have we implemented the enhanced security protocols at the Paris Guild headquarters? Completed yesterday, Ron confirmed. Given the French wandmakers' cultural significance, we've added additional protective enchantments specific to their traditions. The building's practically impenetrable now. Good, Harry replied, though a sense of unease lingered. Selwyn's disappearance felt tactical rather than desperate, a strategic withdrawal rather than a defeat. Double the security detail for the inauguration ceremony nonetheless. I don't want any surprises. The Paris ceremony represented a crucial milestone for the Guild, the formal integration of French wand-making traditions, scheduled to coincide with the seasonal wandwood harvesting ritual. Cultural significance combined with practical wand-making would demonstrate the Guild's commitment to preserving traditions while creating new institutional protections. 3 days later, Harry stood in the ancient ceremonial hall of La Confrérie de Fabricants de Baguettes Magiques, the Brotherhood of Wand-makers, in Paris's magical district. Dating to the 14th century, the hall combined Gothic architecture with magical enhancements that had survived revolution, war, and Grindelwald's occupation. Impressive security, Hermione murmured beside him as they observed the final preparations. Ron's team has integrated protection charms without disrupting the historical enchantments. Harry nodded approvingly. The security measures were comprehensive yet discreet, detection wards layered with anti-apparition enchantments and selective entry barriers, all supervised by a joint team of Guild security and French Aurors. The ceremony itself combined solemn tradition with diplomatic significance. Representatives from 23 wand-making traditions would witness the formal charter signing, followed by a demonstration of the seasonal wood harvesting ritual that the French wand-makers had practiced for centuries. Minister Delacour himself would attend, alongside diplomatic representatives from 12 European magical governments. The event symbolized not just the Guild's expansion but its evolution from controversial British initiative to recognized international institution. "Places, please," the French protocol officer announced as guests began arriving through the magically secured entrance. "We begin in 15 minutes. Harry took his position on the ceremonial platform, adjusting the formal robes that still felt somewhat uncomfortable despite months of diplomatic functions. Beside him, Hermione looked considerably more natural in her official Guild attire, her confidence in formal settings having grown throughout their European negotiations. "Nervous?" she asked quietly, noting his adjustment of his collar. "Not about the ceremony," Harry admitted. "Something feels off. Selwyn disappearing right before this event. It's too convenient." Hermione squeezed his hand briefly. "The security is impeccable, Harry. Even if he's planning something, he can't get near this building." Harry nodded, trying to dismiss the persistent feeling of impending trouble. Years of facing danger had honed his instincts, and right now, those instincts were signaling caution. The ceremony began with traditional fanfare, enchanted instruments playing the ancient melody that had accompanied French wand-making rituals since before the Statute of Secrecy. The Guild Charter was presented on magically preserved parchment, its text shimmering slightly with the binding enchantments that would formalize the French wandmaker's participation. Minister Delacour spoke eloquently about the balance between tradition and innovation, praising the Guild's commitment to preserving cultural wand-making practices while establishing ethical standards that transcended national boundaries. Harry followed with brief remarks emphasizing partnership rather than centralization, a theme that had resonated particularly well with the proudly independent French magical community. As the formal signing commenced, Harry's sense of unease intensified. Nothing specific triggered his concern, the security wards remained undisturbed, the attendees were all verified, but something felt increasingly wrong. The ancient Grand Master of the French wand-makers, Alphonse Beauvais, had just completed his signature with a flourish of his ceremonial quill when Harry noticed a subtle shift in the hall's magical atmosphere. Almost imperceptible, like a change in air pressure before a storm. He glanced at Hermione, who had evidently sensed it too, her eyes scanning the hall with sudden alertness. Their years of facing danger together had created an almost preternatural awareness of threats. Harry's wand was in his hand before conscious thought, years of combat reflexes taking over as he moved toward Minister Delacour. "Something's wrong with the wards," he said quietly but urgently. "We need to." The explosion came not from within the hall but from beneath it, a magical detonation that shattered the ancient foundations of the building with catastrophic force. The ceremonial floor buckled, throwing dignitaries and security personnel alike to the ground as ancient stone cracked and magical supports failed. "Protego Maxima!" Harry shouted, casting a massive shield charm that encompassed the central platform where most attendees had gathered. Beside him, Hermione maintained the shield while casting stabilizing charms on the failing structure. "Everyone to the emergency port keys." Ron's voice cut through the chaos as he directed security teams to evacuation positions. "Move in groups of 5, exactly as practiced." The Guild's emergency protocols activated smoothly despite the unprecedented attack. Portable shield generators deployed automatically, creating evacuation corridors through the collapsing structure. French aurors coordinated with Guild security to maintain protective formations around the dignitaries. Harry maintained his shield charm with grim determination, expanding it to cover retreating guests while scanning for secondary threats. The initial explosion had bypassed their defensive wards completely, suggesting it had been placed long before the enhanced security protocols were implemented, perhaps dormant for years until activated remotely. "Harry!" Hermione's voice snapped his attention to a new threat, 3 masked figures appearing through a breach in the collapsing wall, wands raised aggressively. Not fleeing the destruction but advancing purposefully through it. Assassins, Harry recognized instantly, noting their practiced formation and tactical approach. "Get the minister out now." As Ron and his security team rushed Delacour toward an emergency port key, Harry and Hermione moved to intercept the attackers. Years of combat experience manifested in seamless coordination, Harry attacking directly with powerful offensive spells while Hermione maintained defensive protections and countered enemy magic. The assassins were skilled, clearly professional magical operatives rather than ordinary dark wizards. Their coordinated attack patterns and non-verbal casting spoke to advanced training, possibly former hit wizards or Continental security agents. Harry deflected a barrage of cutting curses while returning fire with precisely targeted stunning spells. Beside him, Hermione's shield charms blocked 2 killing curses before she responded with a complex binding hex that momentarily staggered the lead attacker. They're targeting specific people, Hermione called out, noting the attacker's focused approach toward the ceremonial platform rather than random violence. Harry nodded grimly, understanding the implications. This wasn't terrorism, it was a targeted assassination attempt disguised as a general attack. And given the assassins' movement pattern, their primary target appeared to be either Minister Delacour or the French wand-making leadership. With a powerful blasting curse, Harry collapsed a section of damaged ceiling between the attackers and their apparent path, buying precious seconds for the evacuation to continue. The lead assassin snarled in frustration, redirecting toward Harry with renewed aggression. Potter, the masked figure hissed, voice distorted by a concealment charm. Master wants you alive. The others are expendable. The statement confirmed Harry's suspicions. This was Selwyn's work, using the chaos of a structural attack to cover specific assassinations while capturing Harry himself. A bold plan that might have succeeded against ordinary security, but one that hadn't accounted for Harry and Hermione's combat experience or Ron's meticulous evacuation planning. Your master miscalculated, Harry replied coldly, before unleashing a combination attack that drove the assassin back in defensive retreat. Hermione, status on evacuation. Almost complete, she reported, maintaining shields while monitoring the magical signatures of remaining attendees. 30 seconds to full clearance. The assassins, realizing their window of opportunity was closing, abandoned tactical restraint for desperate aggression. All 3 focused their attack on Harry directly, unleashing a barrage of increasingly dark magic that required his full concentration to counter. A cutting curse slipped through his defenses, slashing across his left arm with burning intensity. Harry barely registered the pain, responding with a powerful concussive spell that sent one attacker crashing into a collapsing wall. The remaining 2 pressed their advantage, forcing Harry into defensive posture as blood soaked his sleeve. Harry, the building's coming down. Ron shouted from the final evacuation point. We need to go now. With a final surge of magical energy, Harry cast a massive repulsion charm that blasted the remaining attackers backward through the breach they'd entered from. Hermione grabbed his uninjured arm, pulling him toward the emergency portkey as ancient stone crumbled around them. 3 seconds to total structural failure, she reported with characteristic precision even in crisis. Hold on. The portkey activated just as the magnificent hall collapsed entirely, centuries of magical architecture reduced to rubble in a coordinated attack that had targeted not just people but cultural heritage itself. They materialized in the guild's emergency headquarters, a magically secured facility beneath the German Ministry of Magic, offered as temporary refuge following the attacks on their previous locations. Medical teams immediately moved to attend the injured while security personnel established protective formations around the evacuees. Casualties? Harry asked immediately, ignoring the healer attempting to examine his injured arm. 7 injured, none critical, Ron reported, his face streaked with dust but expression professionally focused. All dignitaries accounted for. Minister Delacour is secure and unharmed. Relief washed through Harry, though it quickly hardened into cold determination. The attackers? Escaped in the collapse, Ron admitted grimly. But we have magical signatures from at least 2 of them. German Aurors are already tracking. Hermione finally succeeded in pulling Harry toward a treatment area. You need that arm seen to. Now. The wound was more serious than Harry had initially realized, a dark cutting curse that resisted standard healing charms. The guild's medical specialist frowned as she examined the injury. This contains trace curse-breaking elements, she explained, applying a specialized counter potion. Designed to prevent magical healing. Military grade. The confirmation that they'd faced professional magical operatives rather than ordinary dark wizards only reinforced Harry's growing conviction. Selwyn had escalated beyond political opposition to direct warfare, employing tactics that risked international diplomatic incidents for the chance to eliminate key guild supporters. "He's getting desperate," Harry noted as the healer worked on his arm. "These attacks are increasingly reckless. But effective," Hermione countered soberly. The French ceremonial hall was a historical treasure. Its destruction will create enormous cultural backlash, regardless of who's ultimately blamed. She was right, Harry realized. Even with Selwyn eventually identified as responsible, the attack created association between the guild's presence and catastrophic violence. The narrative would inevitably emerge. Traditional wand-making existed peacefully for centuries until Potter's Guild disrupted the balance. Minister Delacour approached as the healer finished bandaging Harry's arm, his formal robes dusty but his dignity intact. "Mr. Potter. I owe you my thanks. Your security team's response was exemplary." "I'm just glad you're unharmed, Minister," Harry replied, rising to greet him properly despite the healer's protests. "I deeply regret the destruction of such an important cultural site." Delacour's expression hardened. "The responsibility lies with those who planted the explosives, not those who were targeted. Make no mistake, Mr. Potter, the French magical community understands exactly what happened today. This was an attack on our sovereignty and traditions. Do you believe Selwyn is responsible?" Hermione asked directly. "The evidence points in that direction," Delacour confirmed. "French magical security has been monitoring his contacts within our borders for some time. His disappearance immediately preceding this attack is suggestive." The minister's composed exterior briefly revealed genuine anger. The hall that was destroyed today survived the terror, the Prussian invasion, and Grindelwald's occupation. Its loss is incalculable. He straightened, resolution evident in his bearing. "France will not forget this attack on our magical heritage. You may consider our support for the Guild's mission absolutely confirmed, Mr. Potter." As Delacour departed to coordinate with French security officials, Harry exchanged a meaningful glance with Hermione. The attack had indeed backfired on Selwyn, transforming tentative French cooperation into committed alliance through shared victimhood. "He's running out of options," Harry observed quietly. "And running out of allies." Hermione nodded, her expression troubled. "Which makes him more dangerous, not less. Desperate opponents take desperate measures." The truth of her observation was confirmed later that evening when reports arrived from magical law enforcement agencies across Europe. In addition to the Paris attack, coordinated strikes had targeted guild-affiliated wandmakers in 4 countries, mostly thwarted by enhanced security but causing damage and injuries nonetheless. Most disturbing was the discovery of similar explosive devices at 3 additional historical wand-making sites, all disabled before detonation thanks to emergency inspections ordered after the Paris attack. This was meant to be a coordinated cultural catastrophe, Bill Weasley explained as the Guild's Leadership Council assessed the situation. The destruction of historical wand-making sites across Europe, all coinciding with the French ceremony. Maximum symbolic impact, Hermione agreed grimly. Attacking not just people but history itself. The implication was clear: Selwyn was attempting to portray the Guild as a destructive force that had brought violence to previously peaceful traditions. The narrative would be powerful despite its falsehood. Centuries of wand-making heritage survived until Potter's ambitions triggered its destruction. "We need to get ahead of this," Harry decided after reviewing the damage reports. Complete transparency with magical law enforcement, full cooperation with cultural preservation efforts, and immediate resources for rebuilding. The Council unanimously approved his recommendations, along with enhanced security protocols for all remaining historical wand-making sites. As the meeting adjourned, Harry found himself momentarily alone with Hermione in the command center, the weight of the day's events settling heavily on both of them. We knew there would be resistance, he said quietly, flexing his injured arm with a slight wince. But this goes beyond political opposition. Hermione moved closer, gently examining the bandaged wound. Cultural warfare, she agreed soberly. Selwyn's attacking the very thing we're trying to protect, wand-making traditions themselves. Harry nodded, the irony not lost on him. If he can't control wand-making, he'd rather see its heritage destroyed than reformed. Classic authoritarian response, Hermione noted, her hand lingering on his arm. If they can't rule, they'll ruin. The contact provided unexpected comfort amidst the day's chaos. Despite the interruption of their dinner and the subsequent violence, the connection that had been growing between them remained, perhaps even strengthened by shared purpose and danger. I never got to finish what I was saying, Harry said suddenly, remembering their interrupted conversation at the Vienna restaurant. Before Ron's warning about the attack. Hermione smiled softly. I think I know what you were going to say. Still, Harry insisted, taking her hand properly. Some things should be said explicitly, especially when we're facing people trying to kill us on a regular basis. Her smile widened slightly. A romantic observation. I've never been good with words, Harry admitted. But I need you to know that what's happening between us, it's not just circumstance or proximity or shared mission. It's... He hesitated, searching for the right expression. It's been building for years, Hermione. Through everything we've faced together. And I don't want to wait any longer to acknowledge it. Hermione's eyes softened, her free hand reaching up to touch his face gently. We've always been rather terrible at timing, haven't we? Figuring this out in the middle of another fight for the wizarding world's future. Would we have it any other way? Harry asked with a hint of wry humor. Probably not, she admitted, before rising on tiptoes to kiss him briefly but meaningfully. For the record, I feel the same way. Have for quite some time. The moment provided a center of calm amidst the storm of events surrounding them, a reminder of what they were ultimately fighting for beyond abstract principles of magical governance. A future where relationships could develop without the shadow of prejudice or dark magic, where power served community rather than domination. Their private moment was interrupted by Ron's arrival, though his knowing smile suggested he wasn't entirely surprised by what he'd walked in on. About bloody time, he commented with characteristic bluntness. Now if you two can stop making eyes at each other for 5 minutes, we have intelligence updates from the German Aurors. Harry reluctantly released Hermione's hand, though the warmth of the connection lingered. What have they found? One of the attackers was identified through magical signature analysis, Ron reported, his expression turning serious. Former East German magical security operative. Supposedly retired after the fall of the Berlin Wall, but apparently still available for hire. Can they track him? Hermione asked. Ron nodded. They're closing in. But here's the interesting part. His known associates include several wizards with connections to a particular magical arms dealer based in the Balkans. The Black Wand, Harry recognized immediately. The notorious supplier of illegal magical weapons had emerged in the power vacuum following the collapse of Eastern European magical governments in the 1990s. Exactly, Ron confirmed. And according to German intelligence, there was a major purchase from the Black Wand's organization 2 weeks ago. Restricted combat magic, dark artifacts, and enough explosive potion materials to bring down a dozen buildings. The implications were disturbing. If Selwyn had acquired that level of magical weaponry, the Paris attack might be merely a prelude to something far more devastating. We need to find him, Harry decided, the brief moment of personal happiness giving way to renewed focus. Before he can deploy whatever else he's purchased. As they moved to coordinate with international magical law enforcement, Harry felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling over him once again. The path forward was clear: if dangerous, neutralize Selwyn's threat, solidify the guild's legitimate authority, and ensure that wand-making remained both traditional in craft and ethical in distribution. What had begun as a financial strategy to keep wands from Death Eaters had evolved into a complex international struggle over magical governance itself. And like so many challenges before, Harry found himself at the center of a conflict that would shape the wizarding world for generations to come. The difference, he reflected as Hermione worked beside him with characteristic determination, was that this time they were fighting not just against darkness, but for a specific vision of light. For the next week, the hunt for Selwyn dominated magical law enforcement efforts across Europe. The Paris attack had transformed him from political opponent to international fugitive, with even his former allies in the conservative magical establishment distancing themselves from his increasingly extreme methods. Guild operations continued expanding despite the security challenges, with the Italian wand-making families finally committing to full membership following the attacks. What Selwyn had intended as a devastating blow to the guild's legitimacy had instead accelerated its acceptance as the necessary response to dangerous instability. Harry divided his time between security coordination and diplomatic engagements, working to maintain the delicate balance between vigilance and normality. The guild needed to demonstrate resilience without allowing Selwyn's terrorism to dictate its agenda. "We have confirmation from 6 additional wandmakers in Eastern Europe," Hermione reported during their morning briefing in the secured Prague headquarters. "All have accepted guild membership and implemented the standardized screening protocols." Harry nodded approvingly, reviewing the updated map that now showed nearly 95% of European wand-making operations aligned with the guild. That leaves only the Russian traditions and a few independents in the Balkans. "The Russians are complicated," Ron noted, joining them with security updates. "Their magical government has officially discouraged participation, but several individual wand-makers have approached us privately. They're concerned about political repercussions." "Understandable," Harry acknowledged. Russian magical politics remain notoriously opaque, with old Soviet-era structures still influencing policy despite official reforms. "We'll proceed carefully there. No need to create diplomatic incidents if wand-makers feel genuinely threatened by participation." As they continued reviewing operations, Bill Weasley entered the command center with an urgent dispatch. "We have a confirmed Selwyn sighting. Albanian magical border patrol encountered him attempting to cross from Montenegro yesterday." Harry straightened immediately. "Albania? That's significant." The others nodded in understanding. Albania had featured prominently in Voldemort's history, both as refuge during his weakened state and as source for dark magical knowledge. "Did they apprehend him?" Hermione asked. Bill shook his head. "He escaped, but not before they identified him conclusively. According to their report, he was traveling with 3 companions, all wearing concealment charms but displaying combat-trained movement patterns." "The same team that attacked in Paris?" Ron suggested. "Possibly," Bill conceded. "But here's what's concerning, he was heading toward a region with historical significance for dark artifact collectors." Harry understood immediately. "The Black Wand's territory." "Precisely," Bill confirmed. "If Selwyn is personally meeting with the Black Wand rather than using intermediaries, he's planning something significant enough to require direct negotiation," Hermione finished grimly. The implications were disturbing. The Black Wand dealt in magical weapons that violated international treaties, artifacts and spells designed specifically for mass casualty attacks rather than individual combat. "We need more information," Harry decided. "And quickly. Bill, coordinate with our intelligence contacts in the region. Ron, alert Kingsley and Minister Delacour, they'll need to inform their respective magical security services." As they dispersed to implement these directives, Hermione remained beside Harry, her expression troubled. "This is escalating beyond anything we anticipated. Selwyn's not just trying to undermine the guild anymore, he's preparing for something catastrophic." Harry nodded grimly. "He's lost the political battle. The guild is established, functioning, and increasingly accepted. That leaves him with only destructive options if he wants to maintain relevance." "We should consider personal security enhancements," Hermione suggested. "If he can't destroy the guild institutionally, he might target its leadership directly." The concern was valid, though Harry had been reluctant to implement the more restrictive personal protection measures that Ron had recommended. Unlike the Ministry or traditional magical institutions, the Guild had established its legitimacy partly through accessibility, leaders who engaged directly rather than hiding behind bureaucratic layers. Limited enhancements, Harry conceded. Nothing that prevents us from doing our work effectively. Hermione's expression suggested she would have preferred more comprehensive measures, but she recognized the balance they needed to maintain between security and function. The next day brought alarming confirmation of their concerns. Intelligence reports from the Albanian Magical Security Services indicated that Selwyn had indeed met with representatives of the Black Wand, purchasing magical weapons that violated multiple international treaties. Synchronized explosive potions, Ron explained during an emergency briefing. Similar to what was used in Paris, but significantly more powerful. Designed to target specific magical signatures across distances. How many? Harry asked, already calculating potential targets. Enough for 12 separate attacks, Ron replied grimly. And they're untraceable once activated, designed to bypass standard defensive wards by appearing as legitimate magical signatures until detonation. The threat assessment was clear. Selwyn was planning coordinated attacks against multiple guild facilities simultaneously, likely targeting leadership gatherings where maximum damage could be inflicted with minimal warning. We need to implement Level 1 security protocols at all guild locations immediately, Harry decided. And reschedule the Barcelona conference, too many key personnel in one location. The emergency measures were implemented within hours, disrupting normal operations but establishing essential protections against the anticipated attack. Guild facilities across Europe enhanced their defensive wards, implemented additional verification protocols, and established emergency evacuation procedures. Despite these precautions, Harry remained uncomfortably aware that they were reacting to Selwyn's initiative rather than neutralizing the threat directly. The former Death Eater sympathizer had transformed from political opponent to terrorist, utilizing tactics that magical law enforcement was inadequately prepared to counter. We need a more proactive approach, he told Hermione and Ron during a private strategy session. Defensive measures won't be enough if these weapons are as sophisticated as intelligence suggests. What are you proposing? Hermione asked, recognizing the determined expression that had preceded many of their most dangerous adventures. We find Selwyn before he can deploy these weapons, Harry replied simply. Not through conventional magical law enforcement, they're too constrained by jurisdictional limitations and procedural requirements. Ron leaned forward, immediately understanding. You're suggesting a direct operation. Like the old days. Exactly. Harry spread a map of the Balkans across the table. We have confirmed intelligence on Selwyn's last location and likely destination. We have experience operating in hostile territory without official support. And we have motivation that conventional authorities lack. Hermione studied the map thoughtfully. This would be outside official guild operations. Technically, we'd be acting as private citizens. Which gives us deniability if things go sideways, Ron noted with grim pragmatism. But also means limited backup if we get into trouble. Harry nodded, acknowledging both points. I'm not suggesting we go alone. A small team of people we absolutely trust. Bill for curse-breaking expertise. Maybe George for innovative tactical options. The proposal hung in the air between them, a return to the direct action approach that had defined their fight against Voldemort rather than the institutional strategy they'd been building with the Guild. This is dangerous, Hermione said finally. Not just physically but strategically. If we're captured or killed while conducting an unauthorized operation in foreign magical territory. The Guild could be compromised, Harry finished for her. I know. That's why this needs to be completely separate from official Guild activities. As far as anyone else is concerned, we're taking a brief personal respite from Guild operations to recover from recent events. Ron nodded slowly, military training asserting itself as he considered tactical realities. We'd need to move fast. Limited equipment, minimal magical signatures, nothing that could be traced back to the Guild. Exactly, Harry confirmed. Just like hunting horcruxes, beneath the radar, relying on skill rather than institutional support. Hermione still looked troubled, though Harry could see her analytical mind already working through the operational requirements. We'd need credible cover for our absence. And contingency plans if things go wrong. Already working on both, Harry assured her. The official announcement will indicate we're conducting private consultations with potential wand-making partners in Scandinavia, plausible given our recent outreach to Nordic traditions. The planning continued late into the night, drawing on their combined experience in clandestine operations. By morning, they had established a workable framework, a 5-person team consisting of Harry, Ron, Hermione, Bill, and George, operating under powerful concealment charms with emergency extraction protocols and secure communication methods. 2 days later, they departed Prague under carefully managed security protocols, their official itinerary indicating diplomatic meetings in Stockholm while their actual destination was a remote region of Albania known for powerful magical concealment properties. The mission combined the familiar tension of their wartime operations with new complexities born of their institutional responsibilities. No longer simply friends fighting against darkness, they were now leaders of a significant magical organization conducting unofficial operations with potentially far-reaching consequences. Their target was a region near the Albanian-Montenegrin border where intelligence placed Selwyn's likely base of operations, a remote area with historical connections to dark magic practitioners dating back to Grindelwald's era. Bill's curse-breaking expertise provided essential insights into the magical protections they might encounter, while George's innovative enchanted devices offered tactical advantages beyond conventional magic. After 3 days of careful reconnaissance, they located their target, a magically concealed compound nestled in a mountain valley, protected by wards sophisticated enough to suggest significant resources behind its construction. Definitely professional work, Bill confirmed as they observed from a concealed position on a nearby ridge. Multiple layered defenses with alarm triggers and anti-apparition fields. Similar to what the old pureblood families use, but with Eastern European modifications. Can we breach it without alerting them? Harry asked, studying the compound through enchanted binoculars that revealed magical defenses as colorful auras surrounding the buildings. Bill nodded thoughtfully. Yes, but it will require precision timing. The outer wards reset on a 15-minute cycle. There's a momentary vulnerability during the reset that a skilled cursebreaker can exploit. Once we're inside, Ron asked, already formulating tactical approaches. Standard sweep and secure, Harry decided. Our primary objective is confirming Selwyn's presence and neutralizing the explosive potions. Secondary objective is capturing Selwyn himself for return to British magical authorities. The operation was planned with methodical precision, each team member assigned specific responsibilities based on their unique skills. Bill would handle the ward breach, creating a temporary passage through the defensive magic. Ron would lead the tactical entry, utilizing his aura training for maximum efficiency. Hermione would identify and neutralize the explosive potions using specialized countercharms she had developed. George would provide perimeter security and emergency extraction if necessary. Harry would focus on locating and engaging Selwyn directly, a role that acknowledged both his combat experience and personal stake in the confrontation. They moved under cover of darkness, utilizing disillusionment charms and silencing spells to approach the compound undetected. Bill worked with meticulous precision, his curse-breaking expertise revealing itself in the subtle manipulation of magical energies as he created a narrow corridor through the defensive wards during their momentary reset. We have 4 minutes before the breach closes, he whispered, maintaining the opening with controlled wand work. After that, the alarm system reactivates automatically. They moved through in practiced formation, years of shared danger having created an almost instinctive coordination. The compound consisted of 3 buildings arranged around a central courtyard, a main structure flanked by what appeared to be storage facilities or workshops. Ron's silent hand signals directed their approach, identifying guard positions and potential entry points with practiced efficiency. 2 sentries patrolled the perimeter, wizards in nondescript robes whose alert posture suggested professional security training rather than ordinary hired muscle. With synchronized stunning spells, Harry and Ron neutralized the guards simultaneously, preventing any alarm from being raised. Hermione immediately applied binding charms and silencing spells, ensuring the unconscious men remained secured and undetectable. Main building shows multiple magical signatures, Bill reported, consulting a detection device of his own design. At least 6 individuals inside. Concentrated magical activity in the eastern section, likely a workshop or laboratory. Harry nodded, adjusting their plan accordingly. Ron, take George and secure the secondary buildings. Hermione, Bill, with me to the main structure. Priority is locating those explosives before anyone can activate them. They separated as planned, moving with the practiced silence of experienced operatives. Harry led Hermione and Bill toward the main building, utilizing specialized detection charms to identify additional security measures as they approached. The entrance was protected by recognition charms keyed to specific magical signatures, standard security for high-level pure-blood establishments. Bill bypassed them efficiently, creating a temporary exception that would register as a routine fluctuation rather than unauthorized access. Inside, the building revealed itself as a combination of operational headquarters and research facility. Maps covered walls in what appeared to be a planning room, with magical markers indicating guild facilities throughout Europe. A communications center occupied another chamber, equipped with enchanted mirrors and specialized devices for secure magical transmission. Eastern Wing, Hermione whispered, detecting the distinctive magical signature of potions work. Strong containment charms in effect. They moved cautiously toward the indicated area, encountering no resistance, suggesting the facility was operating with minimal personnel, likely to maintain secrecy rather than security. The laboratory, when they reached it, confirmed their worst fears. Workbenches lined with specialized equipment contained 12 identical devices, spherical objects approximately the size of snitches, each pulsing with suppressed magical energy. Parchments covered in complex arithmetic calculations and potion formulas surrounded the workstations. These are it, Hermione confirmed, carefully examining the nearest device without touching it. Synchronized explosive potions with magical signature masking. Exactly what intelligence described. Can you neutralize them? Harry asked, maintaining watch on the laboratory entrance. Hermione nodded confidently. Yes, but I'll need about 10 minutes. The neutralization needs to happen simultaneously for all 12 devices or it could trigger a cascade detonation. Do it, Harry decided. Bill, help Hermione. I'll check the remaining rooms for Selwyn. As they began their respective tasks, Ron's voice came through their enchanted communication devices, a modified version of the DA coins they had used years earlier. Secondary building secured. No resistance encountered. Evidence of recent occupation but currently empty. Returning to main building to assist. Harry acknowledged the update while continuing his methodical search of the facility. The remaining rooms revealed additional planning materials, documents identifying guild facilities with detailed notes on security protocols and personnel movements. Most disturbing were files containing personal information on guild leadership, including Harry, Hermione, and Ron themselves. Then, in what appeared to be a private office, Harry found what they had been seeking. A detailed operational plan labeled, Final Resolution, outlined coordinated attacks against 12 guild facilities across Europe, timed to coincide with a major wandmakers conference scheduled for the following week. The plan was meticulous, combining the explosive devices with conventional magical attacks designed to maximize casualties and completely destabilize the guild's operations. Most disturbing was the explicit targeting of cultural and historical sites associated with wand-making traditions, a calculated attempt to destroy not just the guild's infrastructure but its cultural heritage. Harry documented the plans with duplication charms before continuing his search. Selwyn himself was apparently absent, but the intelligence gathered would prove invaluable in preventing the planned attacks and tracking his movements. Returning to the laboratory, he found Hermione and Bill in the final stages of neutralizing the explosive devices, their combined expertise rendering the dangerous weapons inert through a complex series of countercharms and potion stabilizers. Almost done, Hermione reported, her concentration evident in her focused expression. 3 minutes to complete neutralization. Ron and George joined them, having completed their sweep of the secondary buildings. Place is remarkably understaffed, Ron observed. Given the scale of what they're planning, I'd have expected more security. Compartmentalization, Bill suggested, continuing his precise wand work alongside Hermione. Classic terrorist cell structure. Different teams handle different aspects with minimal cross-knowledge. The assessment made tactical sense, though Harry found it unsettling. Selwyn had evidently absorbed lessons from both Death Eater failures and Muggle terrorist methodologies, creating an operation structure sophisticated enough to evade conventional magical law enforcement. Neutralization complete, Hermione announced finally, stepping back from the workbench with evident relief. The devices are inert. They can be transported safely for evidence. Harry nodded approvingly. Good work. Package everything for transport back to British magical authorities. Documents, plans, and the devices themselves. We need. A sudden shift in the magical atmosphere interrupted him mid-sentence, the distinctive disturbance of anti-apparition wards being forcefully activated around the entire compound. Perimeter breach, George warned through their communication device. Multiple incoming magical signatures approaching from the north. Professional pattern movement. How many? Harry asked sharply, already moving toward defensive positions. At least a dozen, came the tense reply. And they're not trying to be subtle anymore. The situation had shifted dramatically. What had begun as a covert intelligence operation was rapidly transforming into a potential combat scenario against superior numbers. Change of plans, Harry decided immediately. Secure the evidence and prepare for emergency extraction. Standard defensive formation. Bill, can you create an apparition point through their blockade? Bill's expression was grim but determined. Yes, but it will take time. At least 5 minutes to punch through wards this comprehensive. Start now, Harry instructed. Ron, George, defensive perimeter. Hermione, package the critical evidence. I'll cover the main approach. They moved with practiced efficiency, each focusing on their assigned tasks while maintaining tactical awareness of the deteriorating situation. Through the laboratory's enchanted windows, Harry could see figures approaching the compound, dark silhouettes moving with military precision across the moonlit terrain. Not Albanian magical authorities, Ron observed, joining Harry at the window briefly. Wrong movement patterns. These are private operators, probably the same team from Paris. The assessment matched Harry's own conclusion. Whoever was approaching wasn't interested in arrests or legal procedures, they were conducting a security operation to protect their plans and eliminate intruders. Time to extraction. Harry asked through their communication link. 3 minutes minimum, Bill replied, his voice strained with concentration as he worked to create a breach in the anti-apparition field. These wards are multi-layered with interlocking triggers. Breaking one activates secondary protections. Outside, the approaching figures had reached the compound perimeter. Rather than attempting stealth, they began a direct magical assault on the building's defenses, blasting curses and shield-penetrating hexes impacting the walls with increasing intensity. They're not trying to capture us, Hermione noted grimly, securing the last of the critical evidence in her enchanted bag. This is an elimination protocol. Harry nodded, recognizing the tactics from his aura training. They know the operation is compromised. Standard procedure is to destroy all evidence and eliminate witnesses. He made a quick tactical assessment. Change of position. We consolidate in the central room where Bill is working. Stronger defensive position with fewer angles of attack. They relocated swiftly, establishing a circular defense around Bill as he continued the complex process of creating an apparition point through the hostile wards. The incoming fire intensified as their attackers realized the intruders were making preparations to escape. 2 minutes, Bill reported, sweat beading on his forehead as he manipulated invisible magical energies with precise wand work. The outer layer is breached, working on the secondary containment now. The building's defenses were beginning to fail under the coordinated assault. Windows shattered as specialized shield-breaking curses impacted the walls, and the distinctive magical signature of anti-personnel wards being dismantled suggested their attackers included experienced cursebreakers among their ranks. "They're preparing for entry," Ron warned, his aura training evident in his tactical assessment. Standard 3-point breach pattern. Harry adjusted their defensive formation accordingly. Hermione, maintain shield coverage for Bill. Ron, George, cover the primary entry points. I'll handle mobile defense against breakthrough attempts. The attack came seconds later, a coordinated breach through 3 separate entry points simultaneously. Dark-robed figures poured through the openings, wands already casting aggressive combat magic as they established tactical positions. The room erupted in magical combat, spells flashing between defenders and attackers in a deadly choreography of light and energy. Harry moved continuously, alternating between offensive spells to disrupt the attacker's formation and defensive magic to protect his team. Ron and George worked in remarkable synchronization, their familial connection translating into combat effectiveness as they covered each other's positions while maintaining constant pressure on the primary attack group. Hermione's shield work was flawless, protecting Bill's delicate ward manipulation while simultaneously deflecting incoming spells with precisely calculated angles. Despite being outnumbered, the team's experience and coordination kept the attackers at bay. Years of facing life-threatening situations together had forged them into a remarkably effective unit, each anticipating the other's movements almost instinctively. 30 seconds to extraction, Bill called out, his voice strained but triumphant. I've got a stable apparition point forming. The announcement prompted increased aggression from their attackers, who recognized their window of opportunity closing. A barrage of increasingly dark magic pounded their defensive position, killing curses mingled with more exotic combat spells designed to penetrate shields and cause maximum damage. Harry deflected a particularly vicious cutting curse, retaliating with a powerful concussive spell that threw 3 attackers back through the doorway they had entered. Beside him, Ron disabled 2 more with precise stunning spells while George deployed one of his specialized defensive products, a modified Peruvian instant darkness powder that affected only those not wearing enchanted contact lenses the team had donned before the operation. 10 seconds. Bill announced. Everyone to central position now. They contracted their defense, forming a tight circle around the forming apparition point as Bill completed the complex spell sequence that would allow them to escape through the hostile wards. In that moment of tactical reorganization, a new figure appeared in the primary doorway, tall, aristocratic, his face contorted with cold fury. Sebastian Selwyn had arrived personally, his wand already moving in the distinctive pattern of high-level combat magic. Potter. He snarled, unleashing a barrage of spells more powerful than anything the hired attackers had managed. You interfering fool. Harry intercepted the magical assault with a shield charm powerful enough to send reverberations through the room. It's over, Selwyn. The explosives are neutralized. We have your plans. The ICW will have everything by morning. Then you'll need to be alive to deliver it, Selwyn replied with chilling calm, before casting a spell Harry had never encountered, a sickly yellow light that split into multiple tendrils as it approached, seeking gaps in their defenses like living entities. Down! Harry shouted, recognizing the behavior of the spell if not its specific nature. His team dropped instantly as he cast a dome-shaped shield charm that barely contained the strange magic, which writhed against the barrier like captive serpents before dissipating. Now, Bill. Harry commanded, maintaining his shield as Selwyn prepared another attack. The apparition point solidified in that exact moment, a swirling vortex of magical energy that represented their escape route through the hostile wards. Bill grabbed George and Ron, pulling them into the vortex as Hermione secured her bag containing the crucial evidence. Harry maintained his position, shield still raised against Selwyn's increasingly frantic attacks. Go, he shouted to Hermione. I'll be right behind you. For a moment, she hesitated, unwilling to leave him even as spellfire intensified around them. Then, with characteristic decisiveness, she backed into the vortex while maintaining visual contact with Harry. With one final shield charm to cover his retreat, Harry dove toward the apparition point. As he felt the familiar pulling sensation of magical transportation beginning, Selwyn's voice cut through the chaos with startling clarity. "This isn't over, Potter. What I've planned goes far beyond those devices. The wand makers will never be yours." Then the transportation magic took hold completely, whisking Harry away from the battlefield to their designated safe location, a magically secured cabin in the German Black Forest that Bill had prepared as their emergency extraction point. He materialized to find his team already performing security protocols, establishing defensive wards and confirming no one had been tracked or followed during their escape. Hermione immediately moved to his side, checking for injuries with practiced efficiency. "Everyone accounted for?" Harry asked, still processing Selwyn's final warning. "All present, minor injuries only," Ron confirmed, applying a healing charm to a cut on George's forehead. Bill's extraction worked perfectly. Relief washed through Harry, followed quickly by focused determination. They had accomplished their primary objective, neutralizing the explosive devices and securing evidence of Selwyn's planned attacks. But the man himself remained at large, and his parting words suggested contingency plans they hadn't yet uncovered. "We need to get this evidence to Kingsley immediately," Harry decided, gesturing to Hermione's bag. "And warn all guild facilities about possible alternative attack vectors." As they prepared to return to official channels with their intelligence, Harry found himself contemplating the escalating nature of their conflict with Selwyn. What had begun as political opposition had transformed into increasingly desperate violence, suggesting a man willing to sacrifice anything to maintain the old power structures that had privileged pureblood families for centuries. Most concerning was Selwyn's final statement. The explosive devices had seemed devastating enough, capable of destroying 12 guild facilities simultaneously. If those were merely one component of a larger plan, the implications were troubling. Despite their successful operation, Harry suspected they had glimpsed only the surface of a much deeper conspiracy, one that potentially threatened not just the guild but the fundamental reforms they had been working to establish throughout magical Europe. He was too confident, Harry observed quietly to Hermione as they prepared for secure transport back to Prague. "Even after we neutralized the explosives. Like he still holds cards we haven't seen." Hermione nodded soberly. "I thought the same. The question is whether his confidence is justified or merely the delusion of a desperate man watching his plans unravel. Either way, we need to prepare for escalation," Harry replied grimly. "The guild's security protocols need to be enhanced beyond anything we've implemented so far. Whatever Selwyn's planning next, it won't be subtle." As they activated their secure transportation back to Prague, Harry carried not just the tactical satisfaction of a successful operation but the strategic concern of an opponent whose desperation made him increasingly dangerous. The Wandmakers Guild had weathered political opposition, cultural resistance, and now direct terrorist attacks. But Harry's instincts, honed through years of facing dark magic and those who wielded it, warned that Selwyn's final gambit might prove the most challenging yet. Chapter 3, The Ethics of Power. Chapter focuses on the moral and ethical challenges of Harry's position and escalating conflicts. Wand restriction policies. Harry implementing his system for determining who can receive wands. Show the process in action. Some cases are clear-cut, others force difficult decisions. Public reaction. Wizarding society becomes divided. Some see Harry as a hero taking necessary action where the ministry failed, others fear he has too much unaccountable power. Ministry countermoves. The ministry attempts to establish their own wand-making program, bypassing Harry's control. Results in inferior wands that malfunction dangerously. Personal toll. Harry's friendships are strained as even supportive friends question some of his decisions. A powerful scene where he argues with his closest allies. Underground market. Death Eaters and criminals establish black market wand trade. Harry must decide how to address this. Does he use force or more subtle methods? Romance challenge. Harry's love interest confronts him about a particularly difficult decision he made, forcing him to defend his choices and examine his motivations. International intervention. The International Confederation of Wizards sends a delegation to assess the situation, threatening sanctions against Britain if Harry's monopoly isn't addressed. Corruption exposed. Harry's investigators uncover evidence of deep corruption between certain ministry officials and remaining Death Eaters, vindicating some of his concerns. Battle sequence. A coordinated attack on multiple wand-making facilities forces Harry to demonstrate his combat leadership, defending his people while trying to minimize casualties. Chapter climax. Harry faces a direct confrontation with the leader of the Ministry opposition, who reveals they have been working with international wandmakers outside Harry's reach to create a counter to his influence. Just as Harry seems cornered, his intelligence network brings evidence that changes everything. The Death Eaters have infiltrated this new wand-making alliance and plan to use it to rearm their forces completely. Chapter 4. Balance of Power. Final chapter resolves the major conflicts and shows the new equilibrium Harry creates. Strategic alliance. Harry reaches out to trustworthy elements within the Ministry and International Confederation, sharing his evidence of Death Eater infiltration to form a coalition. Grand confrontation. Harry and his allies move against the Death Eater operation, leading to a large-scale magical battle that showcases various characters' abilities and teamwork. Betrayal. Someone close to Harry's operation is revealed to be working with the enemy, creating a personal dimension to the conflict's resolution. Wandlore mystery. A secret of wand-making is revealed that changes Harry's understanding of his own strategy and forces adaptation. Diplomatic solution. Rather than maintaining complete control, Harry works with international representatives to establish a new regulatory body for wand-making that balances security with accessibility. Personal resolution. Harry reconciles with friends who doubted him, explaining his true intentions and acknowledging where he overreached. Romance culmination. Harry and his love interest commit to each other, having weathered the challenges together and grown from them. New threat emerges. As the primary conflicts resolve, subtle hints appear of a deeper, more ancient magical threat awakened by the disruption in wand-making traditions. Legacy planning. Harry considers how to ensure his wealth and influence serve the wizarding world beyond his lifetime, setting up foundations and educational initiatives. Chapter climax and conclusion. A ceremony establishing the new International Wandmakers Guild, with Harry stepping back from direct control while maintaining influence. The final scene shows Harry looking to the future, acknowledging that controlling wand-making was just the first step in his larger vision for reform in the wizarding world. The story ends with a moment that balances resolution of the main plot with hints of new adventures to come. Thematic elements. Power and responsibility, exploring how Harry handles having significant influence over the wizarding world, and whether power changes him. Justice versus revenge, questioning the line between securing justice for Voldemort's victims and exacting revenge on former Death Eaters. Security versus freedom, the tension between creating a safer wizarding world and potentially restricting magical rights. Wealth as influence, examining how economic power translates to political power, and the ethics of using inherited wealth for political ends. Friendship and loyalty, testing relationships as Harry's actions become more morally complex. Innovation versus tradition, the wand-making world is steeped in tradition, but Harry brings modern business practices and innovation. Story dynamics. Pacing, the story will alternate between business/political maneuvering, personal/relationship moments, and action sequences to maintain engagement. Character growth, Harry evolves from seeing his plan as simply pragmatic justice to understanding the deeper ethical implications of controlling magical access. World building, the story expands the Harry Potter universe by exploring wand-making traditions across Europe and the political structures of the wider wizarding world. Conflict escalation, each chapter raises the stakes, from local opposition to international crisis, with the nature of conflicts evolving from political to ethical to magical. This outline creates a comprehensive framework for a story that takes the initial premise, Harry buying wandmakers, and develops it into a complex narrative with political, ethical, and personal dimensions, following all the guidelines specified in the request. The outline maintains focus on showing Harry's competence through actions rather than exposition, develops relationships naturally, varies the types of conflicts, and creates meaningful antagonists with believable motivations. Harry Potter and the Wandmakers Guild, story outline the end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.